Yeah.
Welcome to Kent County Levy Court Business Meeting for Tuesday, April 23rd, 2024. Prior to opening the business meeting, I'll turn it over to the County Administrator to explain how those that would like to join us by phone and/or WebEx can do so, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. This meeting is being held in person at 555 Bay Road, Dover, Delaware, in room 203. We also are making it available via the internet through WebEx. Participants can join us by computer or by phone during the meeting. There will be opportunities for public comment from those attending in person or online. When the President opens a public comment period, those attending the meeting in person may step forward to one of the two podiums and be recognized. If you're joining us online and wish to comment, please press *3, which will raise your electronic hand. Our operator will identify you and bring you into the meeting. Pressing *6 will mute and unmute your line. If you're participating online, you will see a hand and microphone icon at the bottom of your screen. We ask that you use those at the appropriate times. We ask our guests to begin public comment by stating your name and address for the record. The county attorney will administer an oath or affirmation to anyone giving testimony during a public hearing. We ask that public comments relate to the subject announced by the President. There is a period for general public comment near the end of the meeting. This meeting is being recorded and will follow all the rules of procedure adopted by the Levy Court as well as the Mason's Rules of Order. Back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you. We'll now come to order. I'll ask Commissioner Maskin to lead us in the invocation. Commissioner Scott leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance. A moment of silence for our troops and first responders. Commissioner Sweeney. All rise, please.
Almighty God, may your grace cover each aspect of this meeting. We pray that all voices will be heard and that we will have a mindset of inclusivity. May this be a safe place for people to express their opinions and a place where ideas matter more than titles. May everyone be engaged and involved, and may all concerns be addressed. May each member of this team feel valued, and may each recognize the skill sets and knowledge that each person brings to the table. Amen.
Please remain standing for a moment of silence for our military, law enforcement, firefighters, paramedics, and other first responders who have given their lives in the line of duty. Please remember all these individual first responders who died in the line of duty over the last couple weeks, as well as keeping their families in your thoughts and prayers as they deal with the loss of their loved ones. Deputy Sheriff Christina Musel from the DeKalb County Sheriff's Office, Illinois. Agent Elizia Ramos Velez from the Puerto Rico Police Department. Lead Police Officer Adam Buckner from Tucson Police Department. Deputy Sheriff Jeremiah Young from the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office in Alabama. Correctional Sergeant Andrew John Faught from the Illinois Department of Corrections. Chief of Police Stephen Singer from Lake Lafayette Police Department, Missouri. Lieutenant Rodney Osborne from the Ohio Department of Rehab and Correction. Special Agent Derek Sean Bear from the U.S. Postal Service Office of Inspector General. Police Officer Ross Barlett from the Ceresco Police Department in Nebraska. Police Officer Joseph McKinney from the Memphis Police Department in Tennessee. Sergeant William Jackson from the Winchester Police Department in Kentucky. Police Officer Michael Jensen from the Syracuse Police Department in New York. Lieutenant Michael Husak from the Onondaga County Sheriff's Office in New York. Deputy Sheriff Fred Fissler from Hendricks County Sheriff's Office, Indiana. Investigator Brian Herbert from the Osage Nation Police Department, Tribal Reservation in Harmony, Oklahoma. Deputy Sheriff Alfredo Flores from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. Police Officer Jordan Wingate from the Oakland Police Department in California. Deputy Sheriff Tobin Bolter from the ADA County Sheriff's Office in Idaho. Police Officer Luis Huesca from the Chicago Police Department in Illinois. K-9 Revan from the Virginia Department of Corrections in Virginia. Deputy Chief Craig Conkle from the Southbound Brook Fire Department in New Jersey. Captain Ronnie Metcalf from the Lexington Fire Department, North Carolina. Firefighter James Ward, Virginia Department of Forestry, Charlottesville, Virginia. Firefighter Michael Vincent from the Clinton Fire Department in Clinton, South Carolina. Safety Officer John Bunardia from the Ross Straver Central Volunteer Fire Department in Pennsylvania. Sergeant Richard Givon from the Ekron Fire Department in Kentucky. Engineer Heath O'Shea from the Jacksonville Fire Rescue Department in Florida. And firefighter John Raisler from the Montana State Department of Natural Resources and Conservation. All of these officers, deputies, sheriffs, firefighters, captains, engineers, all lost their lives in the line of duty over the last 3 weeks. It's been a rough week for our first responders. Keep all of our first responders in your thoughts and prayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sweeney. Ms. Sanako, can we have roll call, please?
Mr. Angel?
Present.
Mr. Hall?
Here.
Mr. Hertz?
Here.
Mrs. Maston?
Here.
Mr. Scott?
Here.
Mr. Sweeney?
Here.
Mr. Pepper?
Here.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 7 present.
Thank you. We do have a quorum with all 7 commissioners present. Need a motion for the adoption of this evening's agenda.
Make a motion, Mr. President. Second.
Thank you. Motion by Commissioner Scott, second by Commissioner Angel. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, can we have roll call again, please?
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Hertz?
Yes.
Mrs. Maston?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 7 yeas.
Thank you. This evening's agenda has been adopted. Need a motion on consent agenda 24-03.
So move, Mr. President.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Commissioner Angel, second by Commissioner Maston. Any questions? Seeing none, can we have roll call again, please?
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Hertz?
Yes.
Mrs. Maston?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 7 yeas.
Thank you. Roll call reveals consent agenda 24-03 has been approved for this evening. At this time, we reserve time on the agenda for anyone who would like to speak on something that's on the agenda, which is not a public hearing. If you have something to add about anything that may be on the agenda this evening that does not already have a public hearing, now's the time. So if anyone would like to comment on something, please come forward. And one online, Mark.
If there's anyone joining us online that would like to speak and give public comments at this time regarding items that are not on the public hearing agenda, please indicate by raising electronic hand at this time. I see no hands raised, Mr. President.
Thank you. This time we'll move on to presentations. The first one is Employee of the Month. Ms. Tanaka, can we have you read that into the official record of Levy Court, please?
Kent County Department heads have selected Denise Y. Ham from the Sheriff's Department as the May 2024 Employee of the Month. Denise is the administrative assistant in the Sheriff's Office and started with Kent County in May 2022. Denise began her career with the county as Office Support Specialist, later retitled to Sheriff Records Specialist. Quickly identified as a rising star, Denise's attention to detail, ability to master and retain knowledge of office processes and procedures, and willingness to adapt and learn positioned her to be promoted to administrative assistant in January 2024, replacing longtime employee Kathy Skinner as the office administrator. Denise is responsible for overseeing the daily operations of the Sheriff's Office staff, which includes supervising and assigning work and daily tasks. Completes payroll duties as the department's coordinator, acts as the liaison between the courts, attorneys, and public for policy, procedures, and state and county codes, assists with the preparation of the department's annual budget, and maintains departmental records and account reconciliation of sheriff's sale data and information. According to the county sheriff, Norman Barlow, since her arrival as a new hire, Denise has demonstrated a level of professionalism and work ethic that every department head hopes to find and add to their office. Denise's dedication and willingness to step up and step in during our recent staffing transitions further proves her tenaciousness and ability as an effective leader overseeing the administration of the office. She's truly deserving of this award on her own merit and diligence shown throughout recent challenges she faced, always bringing a positive outlook daily. Congratulations, Denise, on a job well done, and she resides in Commissioner Scott's and Pepper's district. And the tribute reads, Kent County Levy Court, May 2024 Employee of the Month, Denise Y. Ham. On this, the 23rd day of April 2024, the Levy Court of Kent County, State of Delaware, does hereby recognize Denise Y. Ham, Administrative Assistant, Kent County Sheriff's Office, for her exceptional initiative, dedication, and conscientiousness in the delivery of services to the citizenry of the county.
Thank you. The commissioners will join us down front with Denise and Sheriff. Come on down. Denise, congratulations.
Thank you.
It's obvious that you must enjoy your job. Great, great. This is quite a big deal. I mean, only 12 people get recognized every year for being an Employee of the Month. And for you to be selected is quite an accomplishment. So we appreciate all the hard work that you put in for the county and for the sheriff. And thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Angel?
Yes, thank you very much, and to the sheriff too for bringing quality to our county, because you're all what makes us look good when things happen too. So thank you very much.
Congratulations, Denise, on a job well done, and hopefully see you back in December.
Denise, good job. I've known you for a long time, and to watch you grow like you have and pick up the additional responsibilities and duties that you've had, through some retirements and what speaks volume of your integrity and the person that you are. So thank you for everything that you do for the county and the sheriff's office.
Denise, I echo all that. I really appreciate what you do for the sheriff's office and the county itself. You do a great job, well deserving of the award, and thank you. Continue the good work.
I'll just say that I'm blessed to be a part of it and on a daily basis working with you. It's an honor.
What you may have heard but not realized is she's only been here for less than 2 years. And to be recognized for this level of excellence in the county in less than 2 years is really fantastic. But as Lori was reading your job duties, that sounds like one of those where the sheriff went, oh, I'll get Denise to do that. Oh, there's something else? I'll get Denise to do that. Have they just added on and on and on as you've been here for the last 2 years? No. It all started 2 years ago. There you go. I like that initiative. Congratulations.
Yeah, you're one of the first employees I see every time I come in the building, and always smile and say hi to me. And it was very nice. You're one of the first employees I saw get promoted within. Congratulations.
Thanks very much for all your hard work, everything you contribute to the sheriff's office and the county. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Denise. And I really appreciate you and your team, Mary Ann and Katrina. You guys always have a great attitude down there. You keep the boys out of too much trouble, which we really appreciate.
Time for you to speak.
It's actually more they keep me out of trouble. I couldn't do it all without my team, Mary Ann, Katrina, and I do have to give a huge shout out to Kathy Skinner. I wouldn't have been trained as well as I was if it wasn't for her, but I'm truly blessed to have each and every one of them in my lives and to be able to work for Kent County.
Well, we certainly appreciate you. If you can hold that, we'll get a good picture here, hopefully. Thank you. Great job. Appreciate you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, next item under presentations is Resolution 4048, Kent County Small Business Week. Mr. Tanaka, can we have you read that into the official record, and then we'll have a vote on the resolution.
Whereas the success of a business invariably depends upon its representation in the community it serves, and the reputation is nearly always the result of a strong company leader. And whereas the Central Delaware Chamber of Commerce engages in activities to assist the business community, and each year nominates business persons, companies, as examples of the quality of businesses in Central Delaware. And whereas this year, the Central Delaware Chamber of Commerce has nominated the following individuals, companies, as outstanding business persons, companies. In the Small Business of the Year category, there is Brightside Roofing, High Ground Creative, Lean on Me Caregiving. For Large Employer of the Year, there's Century Engineering LLC, the Kleinfelder Company, Del One Federal Credit Union, George and Lynch Incorporated. Under the Young Professional of the Year category, Kiana Burgos, Jonathan Flamer, Alan Timlin. Now therefore be it resolved that Kent County, Delaware does hereby proclaim the week of April 28th through May 4th, 2024 as Kent County Business Week. Be it further resolved that this resolution be adopted this 23rd day of April 2024 and is hereby incorporated into the official minutes of the Kent County Levy Court.
Thank you, Ms. Tanaka. This is Resolution 4048, so we do need to take a vote.
Move to approve Resolution 4048, Kent County Business Week of April 28th through May 4th, 2024.
Second motion.
Thank you. Motion by Commissioner Sweeney, second by Commissioner Angel. Any questions? Seeing none, can we have roll call, please?
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Hertz?
Yes.
Mrs. Maston?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 7 yeas.
Thank you. Roll call reveals Resolution 4048 has been approved by Levy Court. Now, normally, we present this to the folks listed here at the governor's office in normally Legislative Hall. Have we been invited to do that this year? Okay. Great. All right, Resolution 4048 has been approved. At this time, we'll open the public hearings. Do we have any introductions this evening? No? Okay, thank you. This time, we'll open the public hearings. First item on the agenda is petition for a conditional use requiring site plan approval. First one falls under Commissioner Scott, application CS 2402.
Thank you, Mr. President. Turn it to Ms. Kiefer.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. First, a word about how the hearings tonight will be conducted. This public hearing is being conducted for the purpose of giving the citizens of the county the opportunity to present testimony on the applications before the Levy Court. Everyone will have an opportunity to speak. All statements are to be made from the podium at the front of the room. For the record, please give your name and address. Copies of any written statements or exhibits used during the hearing should be presented for identification and inclusion in the record. For each application, the President will introduce the application. Then the Levy Court will receive testimony from all of those in favor. Testimony will then be received from those who may be opposed. After everyone has had an opportunity to speak, the hearing on that application will be closed, and the Levy Court will take what action it deems appropriate. Levy Court's decision will be based upon public hearing testimony given at this meeting and a recommendation submitted to the Levy Court by the Regional Planning Commission. I would ask that that recommendation be included by reference in the permanent record of this meeting established by the Clerk of the Peace. The public notice of this hearing was published in the March 27th, 2024 edition of the Delaware State News. The first application before the Levy Court, CS 2402, is an application for a minor utility underground propane tank farm. The site is just under 3 acres at the intersection of Barrett's Chapel Road and Buffalo Road within the Cattail Creek subdivision. It is inside the growth zone. The Regional Planning Commission took testimony at their April 4th hearing, and at their April 11th business meeting, voted to recommend approval, including a modified waiver. There's a setback for the tank farm, 200 feet from a residential property, 100 feet from property lines. The compromise that was achieved was to reduce those to 150 respectively. So again, this comes with a recommendation for approval. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Ms. Kiefer, I see that staff originally recommended denial.
Right.
Reasoning.
The staff actually recommended what ended up being the compromise. And the reason we recommended they shift it to a different parcel within the subdivision is because the waiver was not as extreme. It was a reduction in what they were requesting.
Any other questions? Okay, great, thank you. So this is a public hearing, so at this time we'll afford the opportunity for anyone who would like to testify in favor of this application to please come forward and state your name, your address, and be sworn or affirmed by the county attorney and present testimony. Anyone here?
Good evening. My name is Charlie Barnett with Boris and Ritchie Associates, 111 Ruth R. Drive in Newark, Delaware.
Mr. Barnett, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, sir?
I do.
Thank you.
So I'm here on behalf of the applicant tonight, just to give a little history. As Ms. Kiefer alluded to in her presentation, we initially requested a conditional use and the waiver for the setbacks. The Cattail Creek subdivision is a 175 single-family lot subdivision that was designed originally under the intent that it would be served with natural gas pipelines to be served by Chesapeake Utilities. As the project got near the construction and well after approvals, it was determined that it wasn't an option to extend natural gas to this facility or to this property economically, and therefore the developer sought out other opportunities, and Poor's Propane is currently the utility provider proposed for this site. There are two options to provide propane for the subdivision. Option one would be to install 175 underground propane tanks, one on every single lot. And to do so, those requirements would be they have to be at least 10 foot off of a neighboring property line and 10 foot off the individual house. The other alternative is to install 9 1,000-gallon propane tanks in a centrally located spot, and then have that propane distributed throughout the neighborhood via underground pipeline system, very similar to how natural gas would be provided to all the individual houses. We located our optimal location for the initial facility to house those propane tanks, very near the intersection or the entrance to the subdivision in the yellow highlighted parcel shown on the plan in front of you. It was, we got comments from the planning department at the Regional Planning Commission public hearing that was not recommended for approval due to the setbacks for that. They suggested, as Ms. Kiefer said earlier, a different open space parcel immediately to the east or the right as you're looking at this plan here. We took a look at it after the Regional Planning Commission's public hearing, talked about it internally, decided that that was something that could be done. We revised our application, wrote another letter to the Planning Commission, and at the public hearing the following week presented that alternative location. And it was approved by the Planning Commission at that meeting. So we're here tonight. Be glad to answer any questions if you have any for us. We have a gentleman from Poor's Propane here. If you have propane-specific questions, I am definitely not the person to answer those, but if you have anything specific for that, we'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
I do have a propane-specific question. When people pass by on Barris Chapel Road and they look over there, what are they going to see?
So if you have the ability to find the plan that was included with the packet, the conditional use plan, there's a photograph in the corner of that plan of a almost identical facility that they have recently installed. For the most part, you see a mulched, looks like a flower bed, and then there is a very small 10-foot by 10-foot decorative fence that covers the only part that they would need to get into. There's the fire marshal approval that has been already obtained for this. We would be looking for the actual conditional use plan that was prepared and submitted.
Yeah, folks tend to get concerned if they see large propane tanks. above the
Those are all
ground?
below ground. They won't be able to be seen. There is a sizable earthen berm that was already proposed in this open space that will kind of be separating them from the residences, the nearby single-family lots.
All right. And if the opportunity or availability became possible, would you think the site would switch over to natural gas?
I beg your pardon?
Do you think that if the opportunity arose and it was feasible, would it switch from propane to natural gas?
I'm unable to answer that question. I'm sorry.
Any other questions? Jody? Mr. Sweeney?
So, Mr. Burnett, in looking at the picture, when we have solar fields put in, we require some kind of security fence around the solar, and solar is not as dangerous as propane. But these propane tanks each has the entry valves above ground. Is there any protection from them from a vehicle running across them and knocking them off?
To that, I can defer to the gentleman here from Porsche Propane that could probably answer some of those questions. My understanding is the parts that need to be protected would be inside that security fence, but
All right, just have them be sworn in, please.
Yep.
Name and address, sir.
Sure. Michael Steiner, 2312 Ridgeway Road, Wilmington, Delaware.
Mr. Steiner, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, sir?
I do.
Thank you.
Sir, those tanks in this location will be in a berm. So it's going to be difficult for any car to run into.
All right, so Mr. Barnett referred to the picture that's in an offset. And that picture just shows, ground level vegetation, and you can see the head of the tank above the ground.
Yes.
And is that similar to what we would see on Buffalo Road?
Yeah, I mean, basically, this would be the ground level right here. I mean, it would sit up about 2 feet, maybe 2 feet off the ground. That's the only thing. The fenced-in area, which is about 10 by 10, so it's a nice metal fence. That's the regulator station. That's the only thing you would see above ground. Would be a 10 foot by 10 foot.
Okay. I'm just a little concerned because I live on a straight road, straight. And 3 times in the last 4 years, I've had people cross my yard, take out my mailbox, just miss my cars, and it's on a straight road. So if there's a car that loses control on ice on this road and they veer off the road, they could shear the tops of those tanks off, correct? I mean, it's plausible.
Plausible, absolutely.
So is there any way you can put some type of security barriers that keep people from, because I would think someone damaging their car on a barrier is going to be a lot better than taking off the top of the tanks.
I have to see the way that, this is going to go into a berm right now, so I don't quite think that they're going to be above the ground, but in a berm. Okay. So what I'm saying is, I don't think in this, I understand what you're saying if it was flat, but in this situation, I don't see where a car would run into the berm. They would not run into the tank.
Okay.
If I'm clear.
Just playing devil's advocate to Commissioner Sweeney's concern. If a car did get it to this valve and knock it off, is it like a fire hydrant that knocks off but gas wouldn't blow out?
There is a shut-off valve in that's gonna. So if pressure on any valve in the valve situation, if it comes out too fast, it'll slug. The tank will slug shut.
Okay, so if they did knock that off, gas wouldn't go blowing out.
Until it slug off. Okay.
Thank you.
I mean, the pressure itself would cause the valve to slug, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like a check valve.
Exactly.
Commissioner Angel.
Thank you. One of my senior housing developments way back when had a person wanted to plant a tree in their yard and hit the gas valve because it was only 3 inches under the ground. And how far down below is this going to go for each home?
It is 2 feet undergrade. We put it all with marketing tape, and the one thing about it is in the system, it will be in the Miss Utility system, so that anybody that calls or anything like that, we will respond and we will mark it out just like any other utility. Whereas if they were individual tanks, that doesn't always happen.
Okay, and the only reason I'm asking was because I couldn't believe our code didn't cover it at the time. It was 3 inches down and it was fine. So it's now since, I hope, been rendered, but I just want to make sure for safety's sake. Because everybody on that block had to get shut off and had to come back and restart their propane furnaces and whatever. So I don't want people to go through that. So
I have a lot of these systems, and at this point, that has not been an issue.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Mr. Steiner, just to, I think, help some of my fellow commissioners here, these valves are pressure relief and pressure gauged valves, so they'll automatically do a shut off. The lines that are buried, they are buried quite a bit in the ground, and they also have shutoffs at the streets and stuff for them as well. Correct?
Everybody has a shutoff, and everybody has a slug valve, which is different. Individual tanks, like an individual tank, as you go by and see the houses, the valves underground, they don't shut off. Yeah.
Yeah, just wanted to clarify that for some of them.
All right, any other questions from the commissioners? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone else in the audience here that may want to offer testimony in favor? Anyone else in the audience would like to offer testimony in favor? Mark, anyone online?
If you're joining us online and would like to give testimony in favor of application CS 2402, please indicate by raising an electronic hand at this time. See no hands raised, Mr. President.
Thank you. At this time, anyone opposed? Anyone opposed to this application? Please come forward. Anyone opposed? I don't see anyone. Mark, anyone opposed?
Similarly, if you're online and would like to speak in opposition to application CS 2402, please indicate by raising an electronic hand. Still no hands raised, Mr. President.
Thank you. Unless there's any further questions from the commissioners before I close the public hearing? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. I'll ask Commissioner Scott for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Levy Court grant conditional approval of application CS 24-02, minor utility underground propane field located inside the Growth Zone Overlay District. This is based on Exhibits A, RPC Recommendation Report dated on April 23, 2024. Exhibit B, Public Hearing Testimony dated April 23, 2024, and the findings of facts. The subject site is zoned AC, Agricultural Conservation, 20553 permits, minor utility underground propane field as a conditional use. The location is appropriate, not in conflict with comprehensive plan. Public health, safety, and general welfare will not be adversely affected. The plan complies with the conditions of 205-72.E. The waiver 187-53I, requiring liquid propane and or natural gas substations to be located a minimum of 100 feet from parcel lines, 200 foot from the nearest residential dwelling setback line, is granted modified approval. Plans shall be revised to incorporate the staff's recommendations as reflected in Exhibit C.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Commissioner Scott, second by Commissioner Maston to approve application CS 24-02. Any questions on the motion? Saying none, Ms. Tanaka, can we have roll call, please?
Mr. Angel?
Yes, reasons stated by Commissioner Scott.
Mr. Hall?
Yes, per RPC recommendations.
Mr. Hertz?
Yes, for reasons stated.
Mrs. Maston?
Yes, reason stated.
Mr. Scott?
Yes, reasons stated.
Mr. Sweeney?
I'm concerned about security of the site, not only for accidental damage, but also malicious damage, so my vote's no.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes, for all the positive mentioned previously. Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 6 yeas, 1 nay.
Thank you. Roll call reveals application CS-24-02 has been approved by Levy Court. Continuing on with public hearings, petition to amend comprehensive plan map and zoning map. Commissioner Hertz has ordinance LC 24-02. I'll turn it over to you, sir, and Ms. Kiefer.
Thank you, Commissioners. Ordinance LC 2402 is a petition to amend the zoning map and comprehensive plan map. The site is just under 2 acres, south of Hopkins Cemetery Road, north of Harrington, inside the growth zone. The site is currently zoned AC, Agricultural Conservation, and the proposal is to rezone to BG, General Business. The Planning Commission took testimony at their April 4th hearing and at their April 11th business meeting, voted unanimously to recommend approval, determining that the proposal is indeed in keeping with the character of the area and it complies with a comprehensive plan. So again, this comes with a recommendation for approval. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Ms. Kiefer? Any questions? I'll say any. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, this is also a public hearing, ordinance LC 24-02. At this time, I'll ask anyone in favor of this application to please come forward and give testimony as to why. And we'll need you to give your name, your address, and be sworn or affirmed by the county attorney.
My name is Todd Wise, 2884 Andrewville Road, Greenwood, Delaware.
Mr. Wise, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, sir?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
I'm Todd Wise, employee of Aquaflow Pump and Supply. We plan to make this piece of property kind of conform with everything around it. The property to the east, to the north, and to the south are all the same zoning. And it was kind of a requirement from planning and zoning for us to do to kind of bring it to conform so that we can also do a new building, establish it on the southeast side of the existing Aquaflow building, which is not on this property.
Commissioner Sweeney.
Sir, are all the properties that you mentioned that are already zoned BG, are they owned by you?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Anyone else in favor of this application? Anyone else in favor of this application ordinance change? Mark, anyone online?
If you're joining us online and would like to speak in favor of LC 2402, please indicate by raising your electronic hand. See no hands raised, Mr. President.
Thank you. Anyone in the audience opposed to this application, please come forward. Anyone opposed? Mark?
Those online, if you would like to speak in opposition to LC 2402, please indicate by raising your electronic hand. Still no hands raised, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any commissioner questions for a closed public hearing? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. I'll turn this over to Commissioner Hertz for a motion.
All right, the motion is I move that Levy Court approve ordinance LC 24-02 to amend the zoning map from AC, Agricultural Conservation, Low Density Residential, to BG, General Business, Highway Commercial, located inside the Growth Zone Overlay District. This is based on Exhibit A, RPC Recommendation Report dated April 23, 2024. Exhibit B, Public Hearing Testimony dated April 23, 2024, and the findings of fact that the character of the neighborhood is primarily commercial, the subject site is designated as a commercial area, in the Land Use Strategy Map 7-C of the Comprehensive Plan. Facilities are in place to serve development of the subject site, and the proposed zoning classification is compatible with the surrounding area.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Commissioner Hertz, second by Commissioner Scott. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Angel?
Yes, reason stated by Commissioner Hertz.
Mr. Hall?
Yes, based on staff and RPC recommendations.
Mr. Hertz?
Yes.
Mrs. Maston?
Yes, reason stated.
Mr. Scott?
Yes, reason stated.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes, reason stated.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes, reason stated, and I was by there this past Saturday and everything, and that east of Raleigh Hill and west of 13 is commercial, everything from a funeral home to a furniture store, so I think this is the proper thing to do. Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 7 yeas.
Thank you. Roll call reveals motion passed and ordinance LC 24-02 has been approved by Levy Court. Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda, under Mrs. Maston, ordinance LC 24-03.
Okay, adequate public facilities ordinance, Ms. Kiefer.
Thank you, Commissioner. LC 2403 is an amendment to Chapter 187, Subdivision and Land Development. It removes 3 elements of what's known as the Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance. When Levy Court workshopped this last month, it was determined that the requirement for schools to pay effectively a school impact fee is already addressed by the county's education surcharge on building permits. So removing APFO schools will cause no harm. The water provisions are actually already addressed in section 187.53. There's a redundancy. So the recommendation was to pull that out. And then finally, the roads provisions, it was suggested that the county has no authority, no governing responsibility on roads. That's entirely held by the state of Delaware, and it was more appropriately handled there. The Planning Commission held their hearing on April 4th, and at their April 11th business meeting did vote unanimously to recommend approval of the ordinance. I am happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions, Ms. Kiefer? Mr. Sweeney?
Thank you, sir. Ms. Kiefer, first off, can each of the APFO roads, schools, and water be separated out into separate votes?
I would yield to the county attorney. That would be an amendment to the actual ordinance.
Okay.
I believe that the way the ordinance is drafted, it includes roads, schools, and water in a single proposition.
So a single vote?
One vote for everything.
One vote for everything.
Up or down, right.
Is that the way we handled this back in 2007, or 6?
I actually wasn't with the county
ordinance?
when it was done. But my understanding is they were done, at least some of them were separate elements. Roads and schools, I'm not certain. I wasn't with the county at the time.
They might have been piecemealed in, it's from what I remember, because it was such a long process to do the whole thing. Is there any feedback, or has anybody in planning met with DelDOT to discuss the removal of APF roads? Because that seems to be the more concerning part of the ordinance.
We have not spoken with DelDOT specifically about this. I can certainly offer anecdotal evidence that DelDOT, since the adoption of the ordinance, has expressed their frustration with it.
I think their frustration comes from us requiring a TIS when they did not.
Very often, or we make a TIS more complicated than in their estimation it needs to be.
So DelDOT's TIS goes out 3 intersections. What does the county TIS require?
No, ours is 3.
It's 3 also, so it's the same distance.
It is not. They've got more room to maneuver than our ordinance gives us.
Well, I talked to DelDOT. DelDOT says ours goes out farther and more depth than theirs. So Which is it?
Ours goes out farther, yes.
Okay, okay. So ours going out farther would take in more consideration for other development in the county that may affect those roads at the same time as the applicant who is getting a TIS dumped on them.
Alternatively, it captures intersections that are not impacted. Traffic disperses before they would hit those intersections, and it forces the study of intersections where there is little to no impact, adding cost and time.
Okay, so we have a formal agreement with DelDOT, with the development coordinator at DelDOT to offer the APFOs and to coordinate with them on APFOs?
We do not have a formal agreement. We have a formal agreement when it comes to rezoning.
Okay.
All rezoning applications are sent to DelDOT. It's called a support facilities report, and they can determine at that time if they want to require a TIS before rezoning.
Right, but even without the APFOs, we still have the authority to require a TIS, and it doesn't require the APFO to have the county ask for a TIS.
I'm not certain what you're referring to.
According to DelDOT, that's the case, that all land use organizations have the ability to ask for a TIS. We're the only ones that have APFOs, but every other jurisdiction in the state can ask for a TIS.
No, Newcastle County also has APFOs.
So I would ask the attorney, if without the APFOs, can we still ask for a TIS?
I would have to explore that. My gut tells me that we don't need this language relating to roads in this particular ordinance to require a TIS. I don't believe that it would be undermined, but I'm not 100% certain of that. I'd have to look into that.
Is there any opportunity to keep the roads portion but modify it for exclusions, or to improve the communication between planning and the development coordinator from DelDOT to make sure that when there is a difference of opinion about whether a TIS is required, that we can coordinate with them to make sure that we're both on the same page? Or is that something we can move forward on even if we get rid of the APFO roads?
Nothing would preclude further conversation about how to better coordinate between the two agencies. So even if this ordinance were to be adopted, nothing precludes further conversation.
Okay.
Mr. Scott.
Sarah, I just want to clarify something. So if DelDOT gives an approval, does the county's TIS override DelDOT's approval?
What has been known to happen is, certainly since these were adopted, DelDOT's policies have changed over time. And what they will allow in many instances is a fee in lieu, where the traffic engineers have determined further study isn't required, but a developer pays toward their impact on the road system. Our ordinance doesn't allow for that. Or our ordinance, if you hit 50 peak hour trips, you have to do a TIS.
So ultimately, it costs the individual a lot of time, a lot of money, that nothing's really going to come out of the TIS.
Yes.
Any other questions? Commissioner Angel.
Yes, Ms. Kiefer, going back to the original, when we did this, we had runaway development at the time. And of course, we put a moratorium on, and infrastructure for development became our battle cry to help, because that's what our constituents were looking at. They wanted things done in a systematical way. So I'm having a hard time. I understand what everybody's saying here. I'm having a hard time because of this original document. I know things change, but right now development is down. If development takes off again, is this not going to help having this in place?
Ultimately, that's a determination for the levy court.
I know that. I'm asking your opinion, though, as a planner.
I think if the agreement is Levy Court is not the governing authority when it comes to roads. DelDOT is. So no, I don't think having the extra ordinance plays a substantial role. If the economy turns, if the market turns and gets hot again, that happens irrespective of this ordinance. The market turned before, irrespective of the ordinance. That was a banking crisis, not our ordinance.
Well, like I said, I'm having a hard time for that. So I just don't, I feel kind of like we're throwing the bathwater with the baby out the door. 90% of this is going away, and for an issue that, I guess I have to say it this way. The developer has to pay costs for whatever they have to do for DelDOT to get their project done, whether it be commercial or subdivisions. That's the cost of doing business. Mm-hmm. However, if the state wants to waiver it, that's on the state. Mm-hmm. But for Levy Court, you know, we're trying to protect the taxpayer dollars to get the biggest bang for the buck for the development that's coming in, that it doesn't hurt them. It's put on the business. That's the way it was always done. That's the way it should be done, instead of putting it on the taxpayer's back. That's what I'm having an issue with. Taxpayers was going to rear up and say, okay, when's it going to stop? That's what I've been dealing with.
I think the only response to that is the responsibility of that determination, whether TIS is required, whether fee in lieu is required, off-site improvements are required, or solely the determination of DelDOT.
And as I said, if DelDOT wants to give them a waiver, that's on them. That's not on the Levy Court. And we're trying to protect our taxpayer dollars. That's why I keep saying that.
Mr. Scott.
Ms. Kiefer, so what exactly does Levy Court do with this TIS study?
Staff reviews it. Typically, we'll pull out, what we have to determine is that everything will meet the appropriate level of service. And then whatever improvements are required that maintain level of service or achieve level of service become conditions of approval. And to be fair, we did the same thing before APFO.
With everything exception of the road itself?
I'm sorry?
With everything with the exception of the road, since the road falls under DelDOT.
Right, and even before APFO, if DelDOT required a traffic impact study, whatever improvements were a part of that study became conditions of approval for a subdivision or a land development.
And I think one of the other questions that I had, in the event that you have a huge uprise into the market area, you could also adopt something moving forward that would kind of protect if growth got to that point again. Not necessarily with roads, but with things that Levy Court actually has control over.
Which is why EMS remains part of, and it's why sewer has its own governing documents for how to handle growth and how to pay for growth, right? That's where impact fees come from.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what the purpose is behind the TIS when we don't really have any control over it.
Other questions? Commissioner Sweeney? Commissioner Hurst, go ahead.
How many roads does the county currently own?
That would be none.
We own none. So when we require this TSI, you just said our staff looks over it. So we have a traffic expert on our staff?
We are not transportation planners or traffic engineers.
So wonder if we determined that a two-lane road needs a third lane for a turn lane, we can dictate that be put in before they do the development?
We rely on the traffic impact study and the recommendation of DelDOT.
So basically, DelDOT's got all control over this. We have none.
Correct.
Okay, why I got you. What about education? Isn't education a state issue and not a county issue? Or am I incorrect?
The county plays no role in funding or governing schools.
I got two more questions. How many water lines does the county currently own?
We do not run a water system.
So we just do sewer, we don't do water?
Correct.
And lastly, to maybe alleviate the concerns of some of the other commissioners, DelDOT is developing 4 TIDs.
Yes.
And 2 of them should be coming in front of us pretty soon, one in late spring, and the last one, the biggest one, by December, which the developers will pay a flat fee, an X amount of dollars if they want to build in that TID, and that takes care of the traffic study and all future improvements, which is, again, DelDOT, correct?
That is correct. We actually expect all 4 TIDs to be finished by the end of the calendar year. We're waiting on the revised agreements on the first 2, and we'll bring those to levy court soon.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Mr. Sweeney.
Thanks, sir. So Commissioner Hertz brought up TIDs. There's currently 2 TIDs going in Kent County, one in Cheswell and one in Southeast Milford.
4. South Frederica, Little Heaven, the sort of greater Magnolia area, and Cheswold.
Okay, so none of those really address any of the higher growth roads in Kent County that we've had in the last 15 years. Sunnyside Road, Morton Road, Brentford Road, Walnut Shade, Peachtree Run, Irish Hill Road, none of those are TIDs, correct? All those are high growth areas that are not addressed in any TID.
No, I believe Brentford Road is included. And certainly
and
the reason the greater Magnolia area was addressed and the reason it got so large is because we have so much demand for growth in that area.
Okay. If the APFO stayed in place and we required a TIS, that was contrary to what DelDOT issued a letter of no objection. And we determined that the TIS that we required did show that some road improvements were required. What would be your process at that point? You still file it and don't do anything? Or do you contact DelDOT and say, hey, our data came back different than what you think?
DelDOT still participates in TISs, even if they wouldn't have initially required one.
So they may already know if we require a TIS and it came back different than what their letter of no objection said, they may change their opinion.
They don't offer a letter of no objection early on in the process. A TIS is at the very beginning of a development process. A letter of no objection is much later. They don't happen at the same time.
So their letter of no objection may have come after a TIS that showed nothing really impacted the entrance or the peak hours of travel per day.
A letter of no objection refers to recording a subdivision, and that just means DelDOT and the developer have reached an agreement on what improvements are required, and they've approved the plans. But that's at the end of the process. At the beginning, the dispute would be whether something like a fee in lieu paid to DelDOT toward future road improvements could satisfy DelDOT and the need for improvement versus our requirement for a TIS.
Right. All right, so I'm going to ask this, and I'm hoping that you heed this, is that for planning to open up some communication with DelDOT. I'm not going to ask for this to be tabled tonight. I can't separate it out, so we're going to go through with the vote. But to open up communication with DelDOT to consider these things that have been brought up tonight. If you don't do it, then I'll initiate it in other ways, just to make sure that there's communication between us and DelDOT to make sure that if we ever do hit an economy where we're starting to see what happened back in 2005, 2006, that we're ready to address it with DelDOT's help to make sure that we don't get hit with the kind of traffic problems that we see starting to come back now along State Street, along Irish Hill, along Route 13 at 4:30 in the afternoon. I think that a lot of people talk about development being the cause of traffic problems, and they're not going to look at DelDOT and say, why is DelDOT approving all these developments? They're going to look at the county And if the county has no tool in its toolbox to be able to address this, then we have no reason to say, well, you know what, it's not us, it's DelDOT. We have to be able to take ownership of this. So that's what I would ask. I'm not asking for any exclusions. I'm not asking to keep the APFO roads, but just better communication with DelDOT, especially with the development coordinators and DelDOT planning, who I have spoken to all of them about this. They're not really in favor of this. They would rather see us postpone this vote until we can address any agreements, address their development coordination manual, because it mentions TISs in there, that any jurisdiction can ask for TIS. So I would ask you to make sure that we can still ask for TIS regardless of whether the APFO roads is there. So if you can find out that for me, I'd appreciate it.
Noted, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay, thank you. At this time, we will open public hearing on ordinance LC 24-03, adequate public facilities ordinance, and ask anyone here that is in favor to please come forward. Please come forward and give your name, address.
Good evening. My name is Andy Strine, 100 South Rockland Falls Road, Rockland, Delaware.
Mr. Strine, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, sir?
I do.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for letting me speak. I think I'm kind of the one that maybe opened this can of worms to some extent. A little bit of background, I'm a second-generation real estate developer and property manager. We've been active in Kent County since 1986. I think I was mowing lawns back then, but I've sort of moved up in the world since then. We own and operate multifamily housing projects, self-storage, commercial office. We also do land development and build houses, and have been doing that since the 90s in Kent County. I lived through a lot of the stuff, Commissioner Angel, you talked about, certainly the APFO, certainly the bubble that happened in 2007, 8, 9, 10. It was a dreadful time. It was not caused by Kent County. It was not caused by Delaware. It was a national financial banking kind of crisis. I think you have to also take into consideration the changes that happened in Kent County's planning. We used to have the village concept, which was allowed in sort of more rural areas where you put in on-site septic and on-site wells. Now you need sewer and water to get any kind of reasonable density. So it's a different world than it was back then. The project that sort of brought this, I think, to the fore is our project. It's a commercial piece that's in front of a mobile home park that we bought in the late 80s. The original front part of it was the sales lot for the mobile home dealership back in the 50s and 60s. There was a big commercial furniture store. There was a manufacturing plant behind it. There was a convenience store with gas pumps, like a Wawa or a Royal Farms. There was a restaurant, and there was another retail space. Originally, we were paved from north to south. So our road and our parking lot blended in with South State Street, and cars could whip in and out. And when we began to redevelop it in the early 90s with self-storage, DelDOT said, we got to get this under control, and rightly so. They said, we need to consolidate. First off, we want 15 feet of your land because we need to have shoulders and widen this road. And we want to consolidate these entrances down to manageable, normal entrances as opposed to just one big, long paved swath of parking and road and shoulder. In return, we said, got it, understand, makes total sense. At the time, in return, they said, we see your use, your commercial use, we're going to codify your traffic count. We're going to say, well, you've got this and this and this and this and this. We know you're you're planning on redeveloping it. Makes sense, growth is coming this way. So we had an agreement with them back in 2001 that still remains in place today. Kind of fast forward to where we are now. We've built out the self-storage facility. We've got the commercial office project called Millstone. It's where the Keller Williams is. We're just north of Moores Lake on South State Street. We had platted and approved an expansion pre-COVID for 4 additional 5,000 square foot brick buildings. We contracted for one of them and built it for them during COVID. They moved in, but I think we all recognize their market has changed from an office perspective. You guys had folks that worked from home for a couple of years, and everybody has that ability through the internet and through Zoom and through team meetings and everything else. So not woe is me, but we realized that what we had platted and approved, and actually when we built the first building, put the infrastructure in, so the parking lot's there, the curbs are there, the stormwater management, the catch basins, the pond, the transformer, all that infrastructure is in place for offices while the market has changed, and there's not really the same demand that there was pre-COVID. We then became try to be creative to figure out what we could do to release this captured capital. And as luck would have it, I had 3 employees who were out on maternity. They all came back, and they all in the space of a week lamented about how difficult and scarce daycare was. So we said, after the third one mentioned it, I said, let's look at the zoning. We're allowed to do this in that zoning. We've got the footprints of the office buildings and the pads that would work. Talked to our engineer, said, would this work? He said, yeah, but you're going to hit APFO. You're going to be hit, regardless of what DelDOT says, you're going to be hit with the traffic impact study, which is time and money. Talked to the planning department, and they basically said, here's the code. If you have more than 50 peak trips and you're revising your site plan, it's black and white English. You can read it for yourself. This is what it says. And it was pretty plain to me that we would hit that traffic impact study. We then said, well, let's go through and make sure that DelDOT won't require it. We're kind of trying to look for the easy hurdles to get over and say, it's not going to work or it's going to work. Went to DelDOT with the agreement. They said, you're good, gave us a letter. It's not an official letter of no contention or a letter of no objection, but it's the summary notes from the meeting saying no TIS required, no offsite improvements required, no noise attenuation, et cetera, et cetera. I gave a copy of that to Commissioner Maston and the planning department as well. So that puts us where we are now. And in the meantime, we reached out to a multi-county big operator for daycare and said, does it make sense here? And he kind of said, it makes total sense here. You're vastly underserved. So I think we're a good test case for this, but I think what we're asking really goes more broadly across all of the development. The county has a certain role and certain things that they need to do and are staffed for it and are able to oversee it. Roads are not one, certainly. They're not traffic engineers. You don't get a budget for it. In our case, we're not required to get a TIS. We're doing a TIS right now in Sussex County in Georgetown. It's about $60,000 and it's going to take about 9 months. And if you've looked at what interest rates are, the cost of doing business is dramatically more expensive. We're trying to build it in a way, build the daycare for the folks that want to operate it. We're trying to build it in a cost-effective manner where he can afford the rent, he can afford to charge his clients what they can afford to pay for daycare. And at 7 or 8% interest, it's tough. And what used to cost $125 a square foot now costs $275 a square foot. So you add on top of that an extra delay and an extra, I would say, unuseful traffic impact study that costs money, that gets put on a shelf that really you've got no oversight or ability in some ways to even digest it and say, here's what we want to do. That's what DelDOT's for. It sort of pushes this project to the point it's too tough. We've got the stranded money. We've got a location that I think is probably ideal. I think, Commissioner Angel, you talked about the growth in Magnolia and south of us. Those folks are going to drive right past us, drop their kids off, keep on trucking, get on Route 1, go into Dover, do the same thing on the way back. We're on their flight path anyway. So it's the right project in the right spot, but for the APFO that's in the way. I think when you look at it holistically and you say, we're taking care of our stuff, and I went through 2005, I was on the comp plan, we built subdivisions to the village concept, which is kind of ancient history at this point, and now you've got to be on public water and public sewer for any kind of density. DelDOT's going to require you to do a TIS unless they go, this road's an A road, you're fine, there's nothing that needs to be done here. I would say in that case, you would still require it, even if it was an A road that didn't need it, and I'd go out and waste the money. You might say, well, I'm saving taxpayer money, but I'm saying you're going to force me to push that through to the clients, push that through to the customers. Those customers are your constituents, they're your voters, they're your friends, they're your employees, they're your neighbors. In our case, it might be your kids or grandkids that need daycare. So rather than add an extra unneeded layer of bureaucracy and oversight when it's already being covered somewhere else, and I think Ms. Kiefer kind of alluded to, DelDOT in 2003 is not the same DelDOT as in 2024. There's a whole lot more requirements. It hasn't gotten easier. It's gotten dramatically harder. There's a lot more hoops to jump through. And in the event you're in a situation where they already understand the roads, wouldn't they rather have us pay a fee in lieu that goes towards building roads than pay the engineers? No offense to the engineers here, but pay them to put together this study that goes on the shelf to tell them something they already knew and understood. So again, I'm happy to answer any questions. Sean Toner from the Beach Babies, who's got a number of locations throughout the state, is the one that we talked to, met on site multiple times, said, this is great. I mean, I'll let him use his words, but he can kind of describe from a general need standpoint, if you guys don't already know it yourself from your own personal experience, the vast lack of daycare. And it affects your constituents. It affects your voters. It probably affects some of your family in one way, shape, or form. I probably talked too much. I'll be happy to answer any questions if you've got any for me.
Any questions commissioners may have? Mr. Hertz.
Yeah. How many children, how many are you going to employ in this daycare?
I'll let him speak to it, but the facility we were looking at was roughly 13,000 feet. I think it was going to be on the order of 50 employees on a sort of full-time, like early drop-off to late pickup. And I'm guessing it's maybe 300 kids.
And you stated you already got approval from DelDOT, but also you're not really creating traffic. The traffic's already going by you, most of it. They're just going to make a stop to you, drop the kids off, and keep on going.
I'm assuming the people that live in Camden, Wyoming, and can come down Route 10 and turn up South State Street, if they're trying to get on Route 1 or if they're coming from Magnolia, we're on their flight path. Maybe they would have gone on 13 and they could just kind of jog out of their way. But and again, I think the operator can speak to it better than I, but I don't think somebody's driving from Cheswold down to drop their kids off here and then head back north. And if they are, it means there's that much of a larger lack of supply that they would have to go that far. But there's plenty of people that live in our flight path that I think it's the right thing in the right place, which is sort of why I think this caught some of the commissioner's ears. Like, this kind of makes sense. Why are we getting in the way of this? We don't do roads. We don't get budgets for roads.
And to reiterate, you have an approval from DelDOT.
We had the preliminary meeting with a written, the notes of the meeting, no TIS, no offsite improvements, no sound attenuation. I think Sarah could share that, or Commissioner Maston's got a copy of it. That was the first step. We didn't want to go down this path and spend $250,000 and then get to this point and you guys go, I don't care what they say, TIS, and I'm going to make you do all this other stuff, regardless of what you used to be and regardless of the fact that you're not really creating any additional traffic from where you used to be. We were trying to get to a go, no go without wasting a whole lot of money. And the first meeting was a black and white from DelDOT, you're good to go.
Outstanding, thank you.
Commissioner Sweeney.
Hi, Mr. Strine. So Andy, just to be clear, the type of business that you're putting in has no bearing on whether you have to do a TIS or not.
TIS is, from the county APFO standpoint, is purely driven by peak trips.
Right. So, but in your case, the entrance off of South State Street used to be all open. I mean, it was, people could come in anywhere. Now it's not, it's controlled. And I get that. You've done a great job there. How many TISs do you think you guys have done in Delaware in the past, since 1986 when you and your dad started?
Well, we didn't need to do them for a lot of the older stuff. And I mean, maybe the planning department can speak to it, but we've only done one new subdivision since 2003. So in 20 years, there's not been a need because people were working through the old legacy stuff that went back to the banks that took down Wilmington Trust. So I remember sort of in the day when the bubble was blowing up, and at one point, I mean, my recollection may be wrong, but I think Ms. Kiefer said there's like 20,000 lots coming through the pipeline. What are we going to do? And I was like, well, how many houses get built in Kent County in a year? And at the time, it was 800 to 1,000. So I said, well, there's 20-year supply at that pace, but you sunset in 5 years, they're all going to go back to farms. It's a bubble. Now, that's easy for me because I wasn't at risk, and you guys were, and you had your constituents kind of saying, what are we going to do? This is scary. But we've got the luxury of wisdom and hindsight to be able to look back 15, 17 years and say, what we did at the time was right because it really looked scary. None of us knew the financial crisis was coming, at least we didn't. But that bubble burst, those houses didn't get built. The farmers bought them back in large part. The county changed all your codes in terms of just subdivision, so we're not doing these sort of rural half-acre lot on-site well and septics. You're putting it in the growth zone. I sat on the comp plan. We went through all that, kind of trying to put it where the infrastructure was so you could focus infrastructure dollars so DelDOT could improve those corridors and routes. So you've got to kind of adjust your thinking and realize the progress that you all have made over and above the APFO with how development gets done. And there's not been a huge slug of new stuff. I mean, we're finishing up a project that we bought in '99 for 300 lots in Felton area, and it's 25 years later, and we're working on the last phase. I think we'll be out of it in 2026. So that fear of this massive influx of growth.
Right, but that 300 lot, you did not have to do a TIS for that back in 1999.
No.
So you mentioned to me that you were doing development in Georgetown that requires a TIS. Is that a DelDOT required TIS?
Yes.
And that's because there were more than 50 peak hours being generated with your development there.
Correct.
But not with the one on State Street.
The one on State Street is a redevelopment.
Right, exactly.
And they gave us credit for pre-existing traffic flows.
Okay.
The APFO doesn't do that.
So if you had Farm Field on State Street and you were going to put in a 350-child daycare that generated all new, chances are you would have had to
almost
do a
certainly
TIS
make us
for
do a
DelDOT.
TIS. Or if they already fully understood the corridor, they would force us to pay a fee in lieu. So instead of us spending money on an engineer, we'd put money towards the roads that get built to make the improvements.
Because I know you go through there because you have property there, but State Street is almost as bad as Route 13 at 8 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock in the afternoon, especially at the area of Old Mill Road or coming out of Penwood, where the traffic is really backed up almost all the way to Wolf Creek sometimes. So
that's where I work. So I come in and go. I come in and go
So you
out.
know it.
I've never seen it backed up like that. But
like you said, you're doing a redevelopment of something that already exists. What I would like to have seen is an exemption in the APFOs for redevelopment.
But I think it misses the bigger picture of sitting back and looking back at history, recognizing the progress you all have made with your planning codes that already kind of consolidate development where it should be, consolidate infrastructure dollars where it should be. And DelDOT has come a long way from 1999 as well. And they're going to say, I already know this corridor. Why waste the money on it? Put it towards building this road. Or let's do a TID in this area and really look at a region-wide improvement. The problem for us, that again, I think we're a good example of, is you've got these layers of bureaucracy where DelDOT says, I don't need it, and DelDOT's in charge of roads, but you say, I want it, but I don't know what to do with it, and I'm stuck in the middle paying for it. That means I can't do the daycare, and then your grandkids or her grandkids or my kids, I've got to drive way out of my way to do it. So the unintended consequence is you make it harder to do the good things, and you're ignoring the fact that there's already a statewide department that's fully staffed and fully budgeted. I don't know what their budget is, but it seems like every overpass is $60 million that they're putting in. They're doing major projects. you're not staffed for it, nor do you get the dollars for it, it's not, I guess it's not in your wheelhouse. Again, looking at it from 2006 and 7 when the bubble was happening, you guys had to do what you had to do, and I'm certainly not faulting that. But now we can look back in hindsight and go, that was a once in a lifetime thing that wasn't anybody's fault. Here, it was the magicians on Wall Street that were bundling stuff and made the whole world blow up. But if you can clean up the code and get rid of redundancy and make it more simplified, I know you're looking to protect the taxpayer, but your taxpayer is also a customer, and they're going to pay what it costs. And if you layer extra costs on it, it makes it less affordable, more expensive, and your kids go, I want to stay in Dover, but I can't because it's too darn expensive. That's the flip side of the coin. So.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Mr. Strawn? Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Good evening. Sean Toner, 18877 Bent Anchor Court Road with Beach, Delaware.
Sir, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
I'm Sean Toner. I'm the owner and operator of Beach Babies Child Care. We have 4 locations in Lewis, Rehoboth, Townsend, and Milford. My mom started Beach Babies Child Care when I was born. Established in 1997, we started our first facility out of our house. Fast forward 2001, we built our first building in Lewis, just over the Nassau Bridge, we're still there today. 2008, we opened Townsend right when the crash happened. We had 12 kids walking through that building for 18 months. Fast forward today, we are almost full. 2009, we opened our Rehoboth Beach Center, and in 2012, we opened our Beach Buddies Center in Lewis. My mom passed away 2021, and that is when I officially took over Beach Babies and started working and operating with my dad and my business partner. 2023, last year, we opened our Milford Center, which is to date our largest center of 214 kids that we serve. We currently serve over 550 families across the state with 120 staff. This site would be an ideal site for a multitude of locations. The surrounding area that we're serving, Dover, Camden, according to the U.S. Census, there are currently over 3,000 children under the age of 9 that we'd be able to serve. There are nowhere near enough child care centers in the area. It is a declared child care desert, according to childcaredesert.com and Child Care Aware of America. This site would be easy access for Route 113 on and off with north and south, as well as hitting Route 1 for many parents that travel from the area and go north to Townsend. We constantly get calls in our Townsend Center of when we're going to be coming to the area. We serve current families that live in Dover that work in Wilmington and drop their kids off in that area. I really hope they pass this, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Any questions, Commissioners?
Just a comment.
Mr. Sweeney.
I appreciate your testimony. Just know that I absolutely agree that what you guys are doing there is a great project. Absolutely needed. My son has a 2-year-old that they struggle to find daycare for her, and they're both working. They finally got lucky. But if a facility like that were in place, he'd have someplace to go. I think it's a great project. Your project has no bearing on the APFOs, even though the APFO might have had a bearing on your project. But I think what you guys are trying to do is a great thing. Sarah, do they have to come back in front of us again for anything on that project itself, specifically? It won't come to us. So I think you guys are going to get what you want without coming in front of Levy Court. But again, I appreciate your testimony. I think what you guys are doing is a great thing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Not, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Anyone else here? Anyone else here in favor of ordinance LC 24-03? Anyone else in favor? Please come forward.
Sorry. Good evening. Mike Ryman, 309 South Governors Avenue, Dover, Delaware.
Mr. Ryman, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, sir?
I do.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm here tonight in my capacity as the president of the Home Builders Association of Delaware. As many of you know, and I've worked with many of you over the years, I work for Becker Morgan. I'm also a licensed civil engineer in Delaware. Been working in Kent County for about 23 years now on all of the various things that you all have been discussing this evening. I've also lived in Kent County my whole life, and I can tell you I'd like to see Kent County do better, frankly, in terms of being a better place to do business, a better place for economic development, and a place that attracts economic development. I think there's been a lot of positive things that this levy court has done in that regard, and I think this ordinance is another step in that direction. The perception in Delaware as it relates to the permitting process is, and this is Delaware as a whole, is that Delaware is simply too slow and too expensive. I've had clients that are regional developers of mine say they're done with Delaware. They're not coming back here. They're going to go to West Virginia, they're going to go to Ohio, they're going to go to places where it just simply is easier to get things done, it's faster to get things done. And that's unfortunate to hear that. And sometimes that information doesn't always make it to you. The APFO at one point, it had its time. It did. I was here. I remember, it was beginning part of my career was in 2001, so I was here during that era. And I remember when the APFO was being created, and it certainly had its time. But DelDOT has done, they've amended their Chapter 2 traffic study section of the code probably a couple times since then. A lot has changed in terms of the traffic study process in DelDOT. My firm does those studies. In fact, I probably ought to be standing up here advocating to do more studies. I sell traffic studies for a living, but I'm up here telling you that in some cases these studies really don't provide any end value as part of the project. There's no end benefit in some cases, not all cases. The reality, it isn't about whether or not we study more intersections or we study less intersections. It's whether or not we study the right intersections. It's whether or not the study that's done and the work that's done provides valuable information that informs you and the public, and ultimately provides betterment to the community. And the reality is that DelDOT's modified its process significantly. I'll give you kind of an example. It used to be that DelDOT was not all that, it wasn't really well defined back in the early 2000s about what intersections were studied and which were in and which route. I remember going to those meetings with DelDOT and sort of leg wrestling over this intersection should be in and this one should be out and how far the study should go. And, there was a bunch of engineers trying to figure it out kind of on the fly. And ultimately you would end up with some agreement. That's where we were in the early 2000s, not where we are today. Where we are today is that DelDOT performs what is called a travel demand model. So essentially they perform their own model that actually looks at the disbursement of traffic for a project. So when a project comes in and it looks like that project might qualify or warrant a traffic study by DelDOT's requirements, they do this model. That model looks at how traffic leaves the site. Any intersection that exceeds 50 peak hour trips, that intersection is required to be studied, okay? The difference with the county process is the county basically says you have to go out no less than 3 intersections in every direction. So in some cases, there was some discussion about, well, who studies more? I've seen it both ways. The reality is I've seen some DelDOT studies that have more intersections than what the county require, and I've seen some county studies that have had more intersections than what DelDOT requires. It varies based on the project. So it's not hard and fast either way. What I have seen, though, is I have seen situations when you use kind of a blanket, one size fits all, and you say we should go out no less than 3 intersections in every direction. What I have seen is that we spend a lot of money studying intersections that we know isn't a problem, and there's no improvements that come out of it because there isn't any traffic that's generated to that intersection. DelDOT's model shows there's no traffic going to that intersection, but because of the county process, we're studying anyway. So it isn't about whether or not we do a study or we don't. We do studies. DelDOT's got a process to require traffic studies. We do them all the time. We're going to continue to do them. And this ordinance and approving this ordinance isn't going to change that. We're going to continue to do traffic studies. But I think we're doing them in a much smarter way than we used to. It's got a lot more engineering basis behind it than it did many, many years ago. But it's also about studying the right things and actually getting results out of the study. Let's not do a study just to check a box that says it's required. Let's do the study because we're trying to get valuable information out of it so that we can make good decisions from a land use perspective. I think that's where we are today with DelDOT. I don't think that's where we were. I really don't, and I think a lot has changed in that regard. I echo Andy's comments about the process. DelDOT's gotten much more rigid over the last 15 to 20 years. There's no question about that. I think you all know that. The comment, I agree that there is a lot of confusion having two agencies in the traffic business. You know, regional developer, out-of-state developer comes to me and asks me about the process, and I have to explain it to him. And explain that the DOT's got a process, but the county's also got a traffic process, and you got to kind of look at both. And you know, it's very difficult to understand that when you have two different agencies, both kind of overseeing the same thing. Imagine if we did that with water or sewer, it would be a very difficult process. We have seen, and I think you heard an example from Mr. Strine about how small businesses get caught up in this. It wasn't really the intent. I think everybody probably agrees with that. It wasn't really the intent that daycare project got caught up in this process, but it did. And that's just one example. We've seen lots of small retail, small redevelopment. They get caught up in this process. They trip a threshold, and there we go. You got to go through this lengthy process. And a lot of times the results at the end don't yield anything different than what we would have done without that information, without that process. You know, in terms of turn lanes, it's one thing to understand all the turn lane requirements, auxiliary lanes, left turn lanes, frontage improvement requirements, right turn lanes, all those things associated with traffic have nothing to do with traffic study. They're all determined by DelDOT's manual, even if you don't do a traffic study. And I think that gets lost. Traffic studies look at intersections beyond. They do look at the access points. So in some cases, if it's signalized, there could be some study there. But I can assure you that if you're doing a proposed signal or something like that, you're doing a study anyway at DelDOT, so they're going to look at that. But a lot of the auxiliary lanes are determined through their manual and their code that they have related to the same. Really what we've seen in all my years is I don't think we got to the end of the process and said the APFO gave us anything better than the DelDOT process. It just really added time, confusion, complexity, layers to the process. And that's probably, and I'll call it the last maybe 10 years, just given the fact that DelDOT's made such significant changes in the last number of years. And I'm not sure that's helpful. I know I've heard some comments about State Street, Route 13, those kind of corridor issues that exist. I know we have a project that's coming on Route 13 right now in the Camden area to widen and do work that's ongoing right now at DelDOT. The reality is the daycare project that comes along, the small business, small retail project, the small apartment project, whatever it might be, it's not going to solve any of that. It's not going to solve any of those traffic issues because you can't solve regional corridor traffic issues one daycare at a time. Can't do it. It's not even the right way to do it. The right way to do it is one of the things that we talked about is traffic improvement districts. We're huge supporters of traffic improvement districts. We need more of them, and we should really be focusing a lot of our energy on getting those done and getting those approved. They are the best model. It's a regional approach to planning and traffic, and it's a much more predictable model for folks to achieve. I can tell you, I'm sure Andy probably would rather not pay me $30,000 or $50,000 to do a traffic study. He'd rather cut that check to DelDOT and actually let it go into the traffic network. And that's what TIDs essentially do. And that's the right way to do it. And that's where we ultimately need to go. This is a step in the right direction in that regard. I can tell you that adopting this ordinance sends a very strong signal that Kent County is open for business. And I have heard the conversation and the talk in the business community, and it has caught their attention. And they're watching, and they're seeing what Kent County is going to do. Newcastle County goes the other way. They have a concurrency program. They call it concurrency. It's not an APFO, but it's similar to an APFO. It has been a monumental failure. It really has. It has hurt so many small businesses. And now they sit in rooms like this and they have conversations about why they can't do anything about Route 9 and 202 and Kirkwood Highway and all those areas up there. Why can't we do anything about it? Well, because you've developed this concurrency process that hamstrings all of that to happen. And it's really not the right approach. This ordinance is a huge positive for this county. We urge you to support it, even though I'm going to do less traffic study work. That's okay. But it is the right move, and we would urge your support, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, Mr. Ryman? Mr. Hurst?
All right, I'm sure you're, as an engineer, you've been part of traffic studies on your projects. Being in construction myself, you talk about going so many intersections away. Have you ever had a problem with the intersection that wasn't directly in front of a development that the builder had to go fix something at that intersection? Because just in my experience, and I'm not saying I'm an expert, I've only seen developers have to improve the road from property line to property line frontage. And that's why we get these sidewalks to nowhere too. Has a builder ever had to go beyond their project to fix something?
Yes, I have seen that. So DelDOT has a item in their code that they just call it frontage improvement requirement. That's just basically, it has nothing to do with the traffic study. You know, if you're developing a piece of land and the functional classification of the road in front of you is, let's call it a major collector, they have requirements for how wide the lanes need to be and how wide the shoulders need to be. Let's say that major collector doesn't have shoulders, right? It's just, you know, an old 2-lane road, 20 foot wide or whatever. DelDOT would make you improve that. They would do that even if you didn't do a traffic study, because it's not the traffic study that triggers that particular requirement. It's just a requirement in their code. I hope that answered your question.
Well, I understand that, but that's in front of the property itself.
Mm-hmm.
Say the front of the house development is 2,000 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand improving the road, and that's done by their formula that you have to put so many turn lanes in. But I'm saying, if this study found something with an intersection a mile away, has a builder ever had to go fix something at that intersection in order to build this housing development?
Happens all the time. As part of DelDOT's TIS process, happens all the time. Because, well, like I said, DelDOT looks at what they call the area of influence. They do a travel demand model. They look at how traffic disperses from the site. They go out to all the intersections in each direction where it exceeds 50 peak hour trips at each intersection. They do limit it to a cap of 3. But they go out based on the travel demand model. And yes, I have seen lots of intersections well beyond the site itself that is required to implement improvements by DelDOT, regardless of this APFO.
Okay, my last question, and then approving them intersections away from the project, has the county ever made you do an intersection?
I mean, gosh, you're testing my memory. I'm sure at some point in time there was a situation where we had to study it, but most likely probably didn't trigger improvements. And that's because DelDOT's analysis looks at where we're sending traffic. So it's where we're actually having an impact. When I say we, the project is having an impact. The counties just kind of goes out in every direction in 3 intersections. And so if we weren't having an impact, probably didn't need to make an improvement, but we would have studied it anyway.
All right, but I guess the point I'm getting to, no matter what study the county makes you do, the county can't tell you to fix something on the road. It has to come from DelDOT because it's their road, correct?
Ultimately, DelDOT's the governing authority over the road, and I suppose there could be a situation where the county wants something and DelDOT says we want something different because of whatever other data they have, or ultimately they're in charge. It's their roads. And I have seen situations where in Newcastle County where they try to do this, where you run into a complete standstill because the county says we want this and DelDOT says no, that's not the safest situation. That's the other factor here. You know, APFOs look at only level of service. That's what they look at, capacity and level of service. They don't look at safety, right? I mean, they do and they don't, but it's not the governing analysis. The APFO is based on level of service, which is essentially a capacity analysis. And we've seen situations in Newcastle County where the county says, well, our code says you have to do this and this. And then DelDOT says, yeah, but that's actually not safer. We don't think that's the safest thing to do. And we actually don't agree with that. The project literally dies or stops because the two are at a standstill. And so in my mind, and I think this is sort of what you were hearing before, is that DelDOT's ultimately the governing authority and needs to make the decisions about what happens at these various intersections. And it's a function of all of these different factors: capacity, level of service, safety, all of it.
Thank you.
Sweeney.
Mr. Ryman, thanks for coming. So you mentioned that there was a development project that died because the land use jurisdiction couldn't agree with what DelDOT said. Don't you agree that some level of communication between the two of them would have fixed that to some degree?
The code stopped it. So the code was written in such a way that it took that ability away.
Right. So if we change the code instead of completely eliminating it, if we change the code to be able to improve that communication so that when there was a disagreement, we just met with DelDOT and said, hey, here's what we think, here's what you think. Our comprehensive plan has a whole paragraph dedicated to the APFO. So my fear is that we're going to have to go through the whole comprehensive plan process again in order to eliminate out of the comp plan that deals with developments that have a negative impact on transportation going from level service C to level service D or E or F that, you know, we're now going to have to completely ignore. We could probably take the whole transportation section right out of the comp plan. But the communication still has to be there between land use or jurisdiction and DelDOT, which has road use jurisdiction.
Yeah, I mean, I'll let the planning department talk about the comp plan and impacts on that. I think they would understand that probably better than I do. But, you know, I think it's important to understand that approving this ordinance is not, it's not taking away, you know, traffic improvements. It's putting it squarely where it belongs, which is in DelDOT's purview, and it's eliminating duplicate process, layers, overlap, contradictory, you know, issues.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do.
I get that. You got to remember back in 2007, 8, 9, and 10, we were dealing with extreme growth that we did not feel as an organization here that DelDOT was addressing. We were also dealing with DelDOT's decision use program that said that the overpass over Route 1 down at Frederica was like 64th on the list when we knew the economic impact of D-Turf if they would just put that in. So, I mean, we went to battle against Carol Ann and eventually Jen Cohan to get that changed. I don't see that coming anymore, but I really need us to see communication and coordination with DelDOT picked up to a higher level in order to, if we're going to take the APFOs completely out of our ordinance.
Yeah, I mean, I'll let Sarah speak to that. I will tell you that in my experience as an engineer processing plans and applications, I do feel like the planning and land use department communicates with DelDOT. So that hasn't been my experience. I don't think I don't see them as two silos. I do see that communication happening, but I'll let I'll let Sarah.
So have you ever
that.
had an applicant where you said, you know, we should probably do this, even though DelDOT or the county is not going to require it?
What's your question again?
To improve the roads around a project.
I mean, you could, I guess it's within your purview to make those requests.
Not us.
But
Have you ever said, yeah, I think we should do this?
There's been lots of instances where I think something is safer and more effective, where we've made improvements. Absolutely.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Well, good. Thank you.
Sarah?
We've had no discussions with DelDOT on this, have we?
On the amendment, no, I've not spoken to DelDOT about the amendment.
The reason I'm asking that too is as I'm listening to testimony, I had a person come up to me and call me about their business down by, I think it's Crossroads across from Walmart, where they had to put an educational building in. It's not even on the highway, but DelDOT was making them put a bus stop and a deceleration lane and acceleration lane for the business at a cost over $100,000. So it goes both ways.
So that's why I want to make sure, and Jody, I agree with you, Commissioner. Better communication. I think this is something we need to have that discussion too. Before we do this.
I do want to make it clear that the department deals with DelDOT regularly, both on the planning side and the I&E side. I don't want to leave the impression that we are siloed. We are not.
I get that, but my concern is that they didn't know about this, and I wish they had. It would have been nice to have DelDOT have provided feedback, even if it was a yes, but let's do this something different. But we didn't get any of that from DelDOT, and we're just withdrawing from the whole process without them having any formal say. All I have and what this whole body has is my word from what they told me in the conversation over an hour-long phone call, Zoom phone call with them today. So,
Administrator.
One of the things that we deal with on a regular basis, particularly in planning, are state legislative mandates that greatly impact our department's abilities to function. And that's just an ongoing product that comes out of Leg Hall. And while I understand, and I think that the planning department does an excellent job coordinating with all of our state agencies and reaches out, I would caution Levy Court that creating an expectation that state agencies get to weigh in on local ordinances makes our little island of local authority even smaller. That the local land use is squarely a local issue, and certainly we would never want to dissuade DelDOT from weighing in on this, but to have an expectation that state agencies get to show up and comment or give feedback to Levy Court on what little authority you have left, well, might be a can of worms that you might not want to open.
Commissioner Scott.
Sarah, to sum it up, maybe I'm wrong misreading this whole thing, but I think ultimately when this was designed, it was designed to stop growth.
The effort was very much in response to, and I think you've heard that several times tonight, it was very much a response to the boom that was happening. The county was seeing so many new subdivisions, and people were getting very nervous about it. And there was a public demand to do something. And I think Mr. Strine earlier testified that indeed it was a bubble of subdivisions. They didn't all get built. Many of them indeed got bought back by the farmers as the market corrected itself.
And I do feel that Levy Court at that time, they did what was appropriate to, to respond to the actions of the economy. I 100% agree with that.
Everyone was responding to the circumstances they were experiencing at the time.
Yeah, and I just think moving forward, sometimes change is required in order to grow.
Mr. Angel.
Thank you. Commissioner Scott, it wasn't to stop growth, it was to control growth. We do when it comes to subdivisions. That was what the problem was back then. That's what was asked for us. So I just want to make sure that's stated.
Okay. Anyone else in the audience that is in favor of ordinance LC 24-03, please come forward and offer testimony. Anyone else in the audience is in favor? Mark, anyone online?
If there's anyone joining us online that would like to speak in favor of ordinance LC 2403, please indicate by raising an electronic hand. See no hands raised, Mr. President.
Thank you. At this time, we will ask anyone that's in the audience who is opposed to ordinance LC 24-03 to please come forward. Anyone opposed, please come forward.
Name and address, sir.
Michael Pettitamage at 307 Pebble Valley Place in Dover, Delaware.
Mr. Pettitamage, do you swear or affirm, sir, to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back, Mike.
Thank you very much. Good to see you, everyone. Sorry I'm here on this occasion. I was sitting there and resting, and I got a notice on my phone that my heart rate was at 120. What's going on? So, and that's factual. So if I feel a little dry, that's why. I'm not sure where to begin with this. It appears to me that it's going to pass, so I have no illusion to believe that my testimony is going to change any of your opinions on this. But I felt it was important to put something on the record about it, and perhaps give you a little perspective on how this ordinance came to be. Yes, it was undue growth pressure, but some of the underlying reasons why Kent County found itself in substantial growth pressure in 2003, 4, and 5 had to do with a couple of significant things. And one was an election in Newcastle County. And I'm from Newcastle County. I grew up there. I go up there frequently. I've got relatives up there. I would say that most people who live there are somewhat numb to the fact that they live in their cars majority of their day because of the traffic. I'm not sure the discussion about the small businesses dying in Newcastle County is factual because all the roads that were referenced in that statement are jam-packed with cars all the time, even in the off hours. So that's an issue. But the election that changed things in Newcastle County, new county executive ran on a no-growth platform because, roughly 10 years prior to that, and maybe even longer, the Financial Centers Act attracted a lot of new employment to the city of Wilmington. Financial institutions flocked to the city of Wilmington, and they brought with them substantial numbers of employees, which resulted in substantial suburbanization of Newcastle County. And when that happened, a lot of it was unchecked growth. And it got to the point where councils of civic organizations started to rise up. They started to elect their people to try to get a control on what was happening in Newcastle County. And ultimately, a county executive was elected who said, we're going to stop this. And they did. They threw out the zoning code and they put a moratorium on. They developed something called the Unified Development Code in Newcastle County. And they were effective in shutting down development. They rezoned the entire unincorporated area of the county and basically created a huge non-development zone. It was called the Suburban Reserve, which would be similar to our AC or AR district today, which are ag districts which allow development. So that happened, and the development community just didn't fold up and go away. They looked for other opportunities. 2003, Route 1 finally opens up, and it was game on, and we saw a substantial number of developers who grew their businesses, thrived in Newcastle County and the surrounding areas, move further south, and because they could sell product and then they could buy property cheaper. And we saw a land rush here in Kent County, and ultimately in 2005 it reached a peak, and there was a call for a moratorium here. And Levy Court was divided on that. And the alternative was the Adequate Public Facilities program that you're talking about tonight. The Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance was referenced in the 2001 Comprehensive Plan for Kent County as a good idea, something the county should explore. I was planning director. I was your planning director at that time when this boom was happening and the moratorium was proposed and Levy Court was upset. What could we do? Well, I hadn't been here that long, but I looked at the comprehensive plan and I said, well, there is a recommendation for an adequate public facilities ordinance, and I think I had 7, what's that? So we explained what was that, and we were given the order to develop an ordinance, a really short order, and we did it, delivered it by the somewhat, some would say, unrealistic deadline, and then it got tabled 7 times, by Levy Court because they really didn't want to, the majority didn't want to do it. And it wasn't until May of 2006, which was an election year, and the writing started to become clear. The public was outraged with development. This room, there's no one here except for people representing developers tonight, except me. But if this was 2005, this room would be packed with residents telling you, you better adopt this thing because we need it. Not just for roads, but for schools. Roads and schools were the two big things, okay? We had, I can recall, at least 2 nights where unannounced, in this room, or actually over at 414 Federal Street, when it all began, all 6 school superintendents converged on Levy Court, took the podium during public comment and demanded Levy Court not approve another subdivision until you get a handle on the growth here because we're running out of school capacity. You can go back in the minutes. It's there. It should be. And so it took several years, but it wasn't until 2007 when there was a new Levy Court seated who was in support of this. The first order of business with that 2007 Levy Court was to introduce the Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance, and they had it adopted by the end of January that year. That's how serious it was. And so Joe and Molly, you know, homemaker, are home comfortable tonight because the APFO has been working for them for 17 years. Hasn't shut down development, but has put it into some frame of growth control, growth management. You know, 20 years ago, they would have called this, and we kind of called it smart growth. The planners called this kind of approach to managing growth, smart growth. The county adopted a growth zone boundary in the late 90s. And really all it was the area the county had planned to provide sanitary sewer service in. It really didn't direct growth. It didn't allow anything inside the growth zone that wasn't allowed outside the growth zone in terms of development. But then Levy Court, with these growth pressures, started to adopt ordinances to better utilize the growth zone, to direct growth into areas where there were adequate facilities to support growth, where there were roads, where there were fire departments, where there were central water, where all the various supports that are necessary to support urban and suburban growth. Now, in this discussion, I'm not sure what the circumstance is with the daycare center. I've known Mr. Strine probably 30 years. I like Mr. Strine. I like his dad. I've worked with them for years. So I really don't know what the circumstances are. And this is, you know, to me, this is not about your daycare center. But the APFO, and I have to trust that this was looked at by folks who manage things. The APFO language includes, in various locations, waivers from traffic impact study. If DelDOT and your planning department agree that the area's already been substantially studied enough and there's nothing needed, then it can be waived at the staff level. Okay? There's also, and I don't know, again, the circumstances with the application that brought this to the floor. If this is really what's happening, if this conditional use or whatever it is for a daycare center is really the reason that we're here tonight, I don't know. It appears that it is because there was a traffic, someone said they had to do a traffic study when DelDOT said they don't have to do one. Well, that, I think most reasonable people would say that the two bodies need to get together on this, and why would, you know, after 17 years of successful implementation of this adequate public facilities program, a daycare center is the reason you're killing it? I mean, this was to control sprawl. This was to preserve rural character. It wasn't to knock daycare centers in the head. So there's a disconnect there. And I think you owe it to yourself to look into that a little further, because I think you might find that this may not have been needed. But speaking of the APF roads, another aspect of it that you may not be aware of, and it may not mean anything to you, because it does get into the technical jargon and the requirements for traffic impact studies and highway capacity and all this. But DelDOT has this system of level of service for all the roads. Every road has a rated capacity based on its functional classification. Most of our roads in the county, if you get out of the growth zone, are considered local roads, local collector roads, minor collector roads. They lack shoulders, they have drainage swales on either side. They really are narrow, not adequate to accommodate suburbanization. And so the adequate public facilities roads also adopts a higher level of service for roads outside the growth zone, higher than what DelDOT requires. DelDOT's standard is a level of service D. They have this grading system, A through F. And it's kind of like your school grades. A is good, F is failing. And in DelDOT's kind of framework, things that get into the D or below are where they start to talk about traffic impact studies and things of that nature, and improvements. But what your adequate public facilities ordinance does is it adopts a level of service C for areas outside the growth zone. And that's substantial because, it's partly to preserve rural character. There were other things that Levy Court did in conjunction with that to direct growth into the growth zone, related to sewer and all other density allowances and things like that. But we all know, well, I shouldn't say we all. Folks who've been here, know that from day one the development community hated this APFO program. And the reason, well, I can't speak for them, but I can tell you they sued us over 34 times to overturn it. And the APFO stood. And it was at great public expense that your citizens ultimately paid for. And in those days, because we were getting sued so much, and I think the strategy partly was sue them until they say, okay, uncle, we'll get rid of this thing. The insurance company put us on notice. Our deductible went sky high. It was really a difficult time, but at the time, Levy Court stuck together and they said, no, this is the right program for the county. We need to control growth. We can't just have runaway growth. And they ultimately, were essentially about 2 years worth of litigation, and Levy Court prevailed. And so, that's why I say it's hard to believe, for me anyway, that a small application like a daycare center is the reason that this is on the chopping block. So I think there's a bigger story here, but I think it's something that's been in the sights for a long time. And, there may be other parts of the growth controls that will fall later if the forces that are currently prevailing prevail. But I just want to say that I feel like I had to come here tonight to share some of those points with you, because you don't have to look too far in this state to see what happens when there's really unchecked growth. And it's happening now in Sussex County. And if you have any friends in eastern Sussex County, talk to them about how they feel about growth and development. I think you'll get a pretty startling response. Now I'm sure there are those that love it, think it's great, but ultimately, and you know, Levy Court has to decide this as a body, but what do you want this county to ultimately be? One big suburban area? Or do you want to have a well-defined urban, suburban area that's relatively easy to navigate, and you know when you've left that area because you're in the rural area? Or are we going to return back to the days of, you know, sprawl development and you know, a turn away from smart growth? So I'll stop there. I just wanted to thank you for listening to me, and I wish you all the best with your decision here, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Hurst.
Yeah, I'll start with, you said when this housing exploded and stuff that you guys come up with a comprehensive plan and you guided housing to where there were services like fire companies and sewer and stuff. So my question is, if we implemented those when you were the planner and the county administrator, we still have them same rules and stuff in place today, so we're still guiding houses to where the roads are better, you have fire companies, and am I correct?
The question is the adequate public facilities roads provision, I guess, and will it matter? And I can tell you, the folks who spoke before me wouldn't have been here tonight if it really didn't make a difference, and not just costing somebody dollars to do a traffic impact study, but it's one of a multivariate approach to growth management. And again, that level of service C in the unincorporated, or the areas outside of the growth zone, holds those roads to a lesser capacity, and the approach there is that coupled with some of the other things you mentioned, directing sewer, directing where, you know, road improvements are going inside the growth zone, the state spending strategies. If you look at that, it mirrors your growth zone. That you know, the appropriate place for that kind of suburbanization is in the growth zone. But if we take away this APFO, as far as the roads are concerned, you're holding those roads outside the growth zone to the same standard as the roads inside the growth zone. That's what I'm saying with respect to that, just with respect to roads.
So you're saying the county knows better than DelDOT? And let me ask a question here. How many arguments in your time as planner or county administrator did you win with DelDOT that you said, no, DelDOT, you're wrong, we want this, and DelDOT said, okay?
Okay. Worked very well with DelDOT. DelDOT amended their, I don't know if it's the highway capacity manual or I think it's highway capacity manual. Anyway, they put a provision in there that says, you know, here's our requirements for traffic impact studies. However, if a local jurisdiction adopts a regulation that holds development to a higher standard, that DelDOT will follow that higher standard. So DelDOT works very well with this APFO program to the point where they've enabled it in their regulation. I think Kent County is really the only jurisdiction that has ever taken advantage of that provision in the state regulation. To my knowledge, as far as the APFO, ever since it's been adopted, DelDOT's been very cooperative. In fact, I can recall sending drafts over to DelDOT and asking them to redline it. And every change they asked for was incorporated into the APFO to make it work. And again, they amended their code. I can't recall if it was prior to the adoption of the APFO, where they put this provision in there that says, and I'm paraphrasing, that when a local jurisdiction or county adopts a standard higher than DelDOT's, that DelDOT will enforce it through their permitting process. So that's really not an issue. There's cooperation there. It's built in.
But we can accomplish that without making everybody do a traffic study, can't we? We can implement rules that if it's a higher standard to DelDOT, then DelDOT say, okay, we'll go with it. We don't have to require all these traffic studies, correct?
The county provision for traffic impact studies, if you're talking strictly about like the trips generation, the peak trip generation, or 50 trips per hour or more. What the county ordinance does, a little different than what DelDOT does, it does specify an area of influence for the impact of the development. But the APFO ordinance also requires that once one of the warrants for a traffic impact study in the APFO is present, the developer sits down with DelDOT to develop the scope that complies with the county ordinance. That's how it works. So I think what you've heard tonight is, to a certain extent, true. DelDOT has improved a little bit, but you don't have to look too far to see how it's going. And so I think the APFO is holding development not to shut it down, but it's holding it to a higher standard. And the whole goal here is, if development is going to occur, that the developer is going to offset the impacts that are created by the developer's project. They're going to agree to it in advance, and they're going to program the improvements to the road so that someone else isn't left to clean up the mess after the development's over with. And that's what we were seeing back in the early 2000s. And back then, again, I know DelDOT's changed their requirements now, but back then, and partly what led to the APFO roads was DelDOT was fairly straightforward with the trip generation that would cause a traffic impact study, and they would look at a project in isolation. And so I think the magic number was like 120 single-family dwelling units if you were doing residential development. And so we would see these roads with multiple projects, 115 units, 119 units, 118 units, all under that magic number to avoid the TIS requirement. And when you looked at the whole road, you had 600 dwelling units planned and no traffic impact study on a road that's designed to accommodate very low volume farm and rural traffic and not suburban and urban traffic. And that was the problem, and it will be the problem again when you erase this. And I think Sussex County is realizing this now. And if you listen, there's a lot of who's responsible here. Well, we just approved the project. DelDOT has to fix the roads. And the real issue is, do we want to have development and roads to happen concurrently or not? Or are we going to let development happen and then we'll let DelDOT fix the roads later? They're always going to be playing catch up no matter what. And even with the APFO, I mean, DelDOT and all DOTs, they're addressing situations where capacity exceeds volume. Volume exceeds capacity of roads all over the place, and where intersections begin to fail and all that sort of thing. So it's that's kind of the nature of that.
Are you aware of the TIDs that they're making right now? We touched on the night before. Don't you think that will supersede the APFO?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. There's a categorical exclusion in your APFO as it's written today for any project that is in an approved TID, Transportation Improvement District. It's in there. It's been in there since day one. And the sooner we can get TIDs up and running, the better off. But that's been a categorical exclusion all along.
Yeah, I know it has, but We got 2 ready to go now. The other one's going to be late spring, and DelDOT's guaranteed the last one before Christmas, so they should all be in place this year. Just to tell you, my personal feeling on all this is I've been a commissioner a short time, and we got some legislators over there in Dover, a senator, and a couple of representatives that keep wanting to button in the county's business. They think they can set rules on the county and run the county better than we run, when actually they should come sit here and see how we run things. And so I'm a person that believes that we should stay in our lane. And when it comes to roads, and being a construction worker and working on DelDOT projects all over, I believe we need to stay in our lane, and the lane for roads is DelDOT, the lane for education is state, and the lane for water, which we have nothing to do, is the fire marshal. So that's where I stand, that we need to stay in our lane, and hopefully they're over there in Dover, they stay in theirs, and that's why I'm for getting rid of this.
If I could respond to that, I appreciate that. I appreciate your perspective on it. But land use, suburbanization, urbanization, whatever you want to, kind of development pattern you want to, it's inextricably related to transportation and the road system. And it's virtually impossible to separate them and say, okay, well, you know, we're only going to focus on land use and not worry about roads, because, you know, ultimately it's the same public that, you know, is using the roads and is using the land uses that you create. And I think that Levy Court struck a great cooperation with DelDOT in developing the adequate public facilities, roads provisions. And I would say that we achieved the same level of cooperation with the Department of Education with respect to school capacity, and with the school districts too. They greatly appreciated what Levy Court did then, and I think there's a latent effect here where you eliminate these tools that you have today, and it's not going to be realized tomorrow. It's going to be realized months, perhaps years from now. But I think what you see, again, happening in our county to the south with the growth pressure there, I believe, and I have no crystal ball, but I believe that the ruling jurisdiction there is ultimately going to go down the path of developing some stricter rules, or, you know, to control the growth pressure that they're experiencing. And when that happens, it's going to be similar to what happened in 2000, when I talked earlier about Newcastle County, when they shut basically the proverbial door on development. I mean, development just didn't roll up and go away. It found other places. And I think that other place can be Kent County, but I think you need to be equipped with the tools. And you have the tools today to control it, to manage it. It didn't shut down development, and it certainly wasn't intended to knock a child care center out of the box. That's really, you know, that we need to set that aside and say that is not the reason why we're here tonight. You know, we're here to talk about how we control and manage growth. And do we want you know, I think it's potentially a systematic approach of kind of chipping away at some of the growth control tools that you put in place 18 years ago. And because this isn't the only provision that the development community doesn't like about Kent County's regulatory scheme.
How many projects, when you were a planner and county administrator, did you say no to because infrastructure wasn't there? How many did you turn down?
Well, I didn't have the authority to turn down anything. It's the regulations that ultimately direct the decision makers.
Well, I don't mean to interrupt, but let me rephrase the question. How many developments and projects were denied while you were planner and county administrator by the Levy Court that was serving you at that time?
Mr. Hertz, there's been a lot of years between now and then, and I can't tell you, but I'm sure the record will bear that there may have been a few denials out there. But the goal isn't denial. The goal is not denial. The goal is setting up the framework and then having development occur within it in a way that doesn't overrun your systems, whether it's roads, schools, or whatever. So that's the whole idea behind the smart growth movement, is to make sure that you have tools in place to help you manage the growth. And I don't really mean to sound condescending, but you mentioned you've only been here a little while, and I understand that. And so you don't have the perspective I have when sitting in a packed house full of angry residents and who are demanding change because nothing is happening. And one of your former commissioners was one of those residents who stood at this podium pleading with Levy Court to adopt the adequate public facilities. Stop tabling this stuff. I'm running for Levy Court. I mean, that's what I saw sitting right over there.
I can't imagine who that was.
It's emblazoned in my mind. I'll never forget that.
Well, he likes to hear himself talk a lot.
Any other questions for Mr. Pettermosh? Any other questions? Mr. Angel?
Mr. Pettermosh, thank you. As you're discussing this, since I'm last of the Mohicans when we did this a long time ago, you actually jarred my memory on a couple things, so I was making some notes of what you were saying that I've forgotten about because it's been such a long time. So I just wanted to thank you for coming forth and giving the perspective of why the originality of this was so important. Thank you.
Mr. President, if I could just say thank you. Again, I wish you well with this decision. And I think it's could be a monumental decision. I'll leave it at that. And history will tell us how it was right or not. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience who is opposed to ordinance LC 24-03, please come forward. Anyone opposed? Mark?
If there's anyone joining us online that would like to speak in opposition to LC 2403, please indicate by raising electronic hand at this time. See no hands raised, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I have a partial answer for Commissioner Sweeney and others. I did locate an area where there is TIS authorization in the context of zoning changes. That's as far as I've gotten at this juncture.
So that's outside of the APFO ordinance?
Correct.
Thank you.
Any questions of staff before I close public hearing? Sweeney?
No.
This time I'll close the public hearing. I'll turn ordinance LC 24-03 over to Commissioner Maston.
I move that the Levy Court approve ordinance LC 2403, deleting the roads, schools, and water provisions of the adequate public facilities ordinance. This is based upon Exhibit A, memorandum from staff dated April 23, 2024, Exhibit B, public hearing testimony dated April 23, 2024, and the findings of the fact that A, Kent County has no governing authority over road design, construction, or maintenance, and DelDOT has revised their standards to better capture the improvements required by new development. B, the education surcharge on building permits will adequately replace the school capacity mitigation fee. C, Chapter 187 subdivision and land development already requires the installation of public water for subdivisions over 10 lots, and Title I, Chapter 700 of the Delaware Administrative Code addresses the installation of fire protection under the purview of this Delaware State Fire Marshal's Office.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Commissioner Maston to approve ordinance LC 24-03, second by Commissioner Scott. Any questions on the motion? If not, can we have roll call?
Mr. Angel?
Okay. Well, I was always told vote my conscience, so I'm going to do that. And if you don't believe in what you do, you'll fall for anything, is what I always say. And making changes to a document that's working well, that we were busy. There's already a waiver in place to control sprawl, preserves the rural character of our land. We were sued many times and won many times, including the Supreme Court on a moratorium that was put in place for this. I want to be ready for the next sprawl of growth. Under the old planner and administrator, he worked with old DelDOT, and this can work. I just wish we would have had more discussions with DelDOT before we did this. It is a higher standard we have now, so I'm going to vote no.
Mr. Hall?
Yes, absolutely.
Mr. Hertz?
Yes.
Mrs. Maston?
Yes, for reasons stated.
Scott?
Yes, because I believe that Levy Court has no control over roads. Reasons stated, RPC's recommendation, staff recommendation, and in order to slow growth moving forward, I think there's ordinances that we can work on that we actually do have some control over.
Mr. Sweeney?
And for the last 18 years, there's been a 13-page section in the county comprehensive plan that specifically gives Kent County Levy Court the authority over roads and the ability to impact road infrastructure. I sincerely wish we could have separated out the education surcharge or the education school capacity mitigation fee and the water, public water sections of this, and dealt with them separately, because we do have internal mechanisms that already take care of that. But I believe taking the roads out takes a tool away from Kent County to be able to manage growth. Every 4 years, I run on the same thing: infrastructure before growth. So in this case, I got to stick to that. I wish that we had a better opportunity to make changes to the APFOs that would have dealt with, and I believe that you heard tonight that there already is adequate public facility ordinance code that would have allowed Ms. Kiefer to waive a TIS for the parcel that came up and instigated all this. So at this point in time, because I can't separate roads out from water and schools, my vote's no.
Mr. Pepper?
You know, I have had a unique opportunity or a unique perspective on this. I was in Levy Court, left in 1998, had no plans of coming back, and then all this growth started happening. I was in that audience behind Commissioner, at that time, Citizen Buxton, and I heard his campaign war cry of infrastructure before development, and I agreed with it. And I thought that the county did an outstanding job coming up with this ordinance, and this APFO ordinance. And I had the opportunity to run for office again and come back with that unique perspective. The uncontrolled growth that we experienced back in the early 2000s was not pleasant. We're still dealing with that. We got large housing developments on 2-lane roads with no shoulders. And so, you know, and common sense can rule in this. And the, as far as making the Levy Court making decisions or planning office making decisions, common sense says if you don't need it, you don't need it. And if DelDOT doesn't need it, then we shouldn't have to need it, have to want it. But So, you know, I see, you know, the folks that are in favor of changing the ordinance. I see what they want to do. I understand it. They think it'll stimulate economic development, and I can go along with that. But what I don't want to do is stimulate growth like we had in the past with no control over it. And so I just think it's going down a bad road by overturning this. It's something that's worked for all these years. I just think Levy Court in the past made the right decision, made a hard decision, and defended that decision in the courts. And I just think that it's the wrong decision this time. So I'm going to vote no.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 4 yeas, 3 nay.
Thank you. Roll call reveals that ordinance LC 24-03 has been approved by Levy Court. Moving on to extension of Stormwater Maintenance District, Jockey Hollow. Commissioner Hertz.
Thank you, Commissioner. Resolution 4041A adds the Jockey Hollow subdivision to the Stormwater Maintenance District. Majority of the lot owners have signed the petition in the affirmative. Our staff has confirmed those signatures. The operation and maintenance plan is finalized. Given the late date of adding Jockey Hollow to the district, the first billing will be in this coming tax season at whatever rate is adopted in the FY25 budget. It meets all the criteria for joining the district. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Any questions for staff? Don't see any. Okay, this is a resolution, and it requires public hearing. So anyone in the audience who is in favor of Resolution 4041-A, please come forward. Thank you for hanging around, sir.
It's been a long night. Good evening. My name's Ed Sonson, and I live at 213 Country Hollow Drive, Clayton, Delaware.
Sir, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Could you spell your last name, please?
It's S as in Sam, O-N, S as in Sam, O-N.
Thank you.
I'm here on behalf, I'm on the board of directors for the Jockey Hollow Home Association. And in September, our board changes every year. So we've been trying to get into this program for probably about a good year and a half. The problem is that through the county inspection, we initially failed. Our development took quite some time to finish because of a builder going under. We were in limbo for probably another 3 to 4 years, and then another builder came in and just recently, within the last 2 years, finished it. That being said, a lot of stuff wasn't properly taken care of. So when the county came out to do the inspection, they found a lot of stuff wrong. So when I came on, we were still in limbo, and I decided to take this on. And I contacted Sean Miller, and I asked him for an hour of his time to come out to the community and meet me in front of my house, and let's walk these retention ponds. Let's see what the problem is. I'm not good as reading a ton of stuff on paper. I'm a visual guy. So I want to get boots on the ground. I want to see what the problem is, and I want to get it fixed. So Sean was gracious enough to come out. We walked the ponds. He told me what the problem was. We had estimates over $30,000, $40,000. We are a 210 home community and roughly $333 a year for HOA fees. So this being said, $40,000 is an impact on us financially. And so long story short, working with Sean, everything was done. It took some time for about $1,000. Still to this day, he can't believe it. He wants to know if I was a magician. I said, hey, I mean, sometimes these things come your way, so I think it was meant to be, but this, I'm asking the court to approve this because we have 6 retention ponds. And out of the 6, 1 is considered a dry pond, which you know takes on water and eventually would go dry. The other 5 ponds, the largest one is probably over 3 acres in size, probably even bigger than that. And if one of these would fail, we would be faced with probably a special assessment, and our fees would go up drastically. I was always told, I've been in this building quite a few times. This is the first time I've been in this court. I was always told the hardest thing is to get signed off from the county. And I would have to tell you that I disagree with that. At least things were in my control. Working with the other board members, we got things done. The hardest thing for me was to educate people in the community and to ask them for $28 more a year, especially in these times in this economy. And it was tough. I mean, yeah, I had big shoulders. I mean, I got some, some people were nice, some weren't. But I really believe that we need this to pass. And everything right now is cleaned up. We got signed off, like I said. I was tickled to death. And then I get a phone call from Jessie Lindenberg from planning. She says, Ed, she said, you never got all your signatures verified. I said, well, it was passed down to me from the last board that they had verification. She said, no, you never got it. So that delayed things even more. So then I had to go back to, since we started the program, every new home that changed ownership, which probably was about 12, 14 homes, I had a one-on-one, have a meeting with each homeowner and tell them what the program was about and ask for their approval for the program. Well, like I said, we got it done on there. We got the county. I just need the court to agree to it and we can move on. Any questions for me?
Sweeney.
So congratulations.
Thank you.
I've been on Levy Court going on 16 years.
Yes.
And the 2 things that I've really been proud of while I've been on Levy Court, the APFOs that you just heard for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And the stormwater program. The stormwater program is a great program.
It is.
Helps homeowners out. And you wouldn't believe how many subdivisions that I've been to and tried to convince them to get in the program that still not even remotely interested.
Right.
So congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes. Any other questions, comments? Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
And thank you for your efforts. And I know that it's not a small thing to convince people to spend more money, but I think you'll find that they'll find it money well spent.
Yeah, down the road, if I'm still living there, but hopefully one day it will pay off.
Does that mean they may throw you out?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't know if I'll get the next election vote for to be on the board. We'll see.
All right.
But can I say one more thing? I just want to thank the county, the people that I work with, Sean Miller, Jessie Lindenberg, the time I spent with the 2 of them, they were very helpful, and I couldn't work with a bunch of better people.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Thank you, sir. Okay. Anyone else in the audience? Anyone else in the audience in favor? Mark, anyone in favor?
If you're joining us online and would like to speak in favor of this application, please indicate by raising your electronic hand. See no hands raised, Mr. President.
Thank you. This time we ask anyone opposed to this resolution 4041A? Please come forward. Anyone opposed? Mark?
Similarly, if you're online and would like to speak in opposition to Resolution 4041, please indicate by raising your electronic hand. Still no hands raised, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any questions commissioners may have before I close the public hearing? Seeing none, close the public hearing. I turn it over to Commissioner Hertz for a motion.
Yes, finding that the proposed stormwater maintenance district expansion is adequate and appropriate, that all the property owners within the district are benefited directly and indirectly thereby, and that it is the public interest to extend the stormwater maintenance district I move to approve Resolution 4041A, creating the Jackie Hollow Stormwater Maintenance District.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Commissioner Hertz, second by Commissioner Hall. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, can we have roll call, please?
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Hertz?
Absolutely, and I'll tell you, I'm doing a pond right now up in Newcastle with the original bid of $598,000, and we just got a change order for $156,000, so we're over $600,000. So, or correction, $700,000. So, good choice.
Mrs. Maston?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 7 yeas.
Thank you. Roll call reveals the motion passed. Thank you, sir. Thank you for hanging around. Good luck. Okay, we're moving on to updates to various fee schedules. Falls under Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ordinance LC 24-06, Sheriff Fee Schedule Updates, an ordinance to repeal and replace Kent County Code Chapter 128 Fees, Part 2 Fee Schedule, Article 11 Fees, enumerated 128.47 for the sheriffs.
Any questions?
Is that your motion?
Well, wait a minute. That's public hearings.
Oh, true.
Any questions before we open public hearings? Okay, this is an ordinance, requires a public hearing, so I ask anyone who's in favor of ordinance LC 24-06, Sheriff Fee Schedule Update, please come forward. Anyone in the audience, please come forward. Mark?
If you're online and would like to speak in favor of ordinance LC 2406, please indicate by raising electronic hand. See no hands raised, Mr. President.
Thank you. Anyone in the audience who may be opposed? Anyone in the audience who may be opposed to ordinance LC 24-06? Please come forward. Mark?
Anyone online that would like to speak in opposition to ordinance LC 2406, please indicate by raising electronic hand. No hands raised, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any questions of the commissioners before I close the public hearing? Seeing none, close the public hearing. Turn it over to Commissioner Scott for a motion.
Make a motion for ordinance LC 24-06, Sheriff's Fee Schedule Update, an ordinance to repeal and replace Kent County Code Chapter 128 Fees, Part 2 Fee Schedule, Article 11 Fees, enumerated 128.47 for the sheriff.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Commissioner Scott, second by Commissioner Maston to approve. Any questions? Seeing none, Ms. Tanaka.
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Hertz?
Yes.
Mrs. Maston?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yeah, I don't want to repeat myself 4 times under Mr. Scott and 1 more time under Commissioner Maston. So I'm just going to say that, once again, second year in a row, the county is facing some serious financial issues. We have not looked at fees to increase for a number of years to this extent. So I want to thank the sheriff, the Register of Wills, the Recorder of Deeds, the Clerk of the Peace, Sarah Kiefer, and Department of Planning for all their hard work in looking at their fee structure and bringing all these forward. My vote's going to be yes on all of them, but I'm not saying that every time you guys bring one up.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 7 yeas.
Thank you. Roll call reveals ordinance LC 24-06 has been approved by Levy Court. Ordinance LC 24-07, Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ordinance LC 24-07, Recorder of Deeds Fee Schedule Update, and Ordinance to repeal and replace Kent County Code Chapter 128 Fees, Part 2 Fee Schedule, Article 11 Fees enumerated 128.44 for the Recorder of Deeds.
That's a motion. Do you need a second? You're getting me confused now, Commissioner Sweeney. All right, ordinance LC 24-07. This is a public hearing. I'll ask anyone who may be in the audience to please come forward if you are in favor. Anyone in favor, please come forward. Mark?
If you're online and want to speak in favor of ordinance LC 24-07, please indicate by raising your electronic hand. No hands raised, Mr. President.
Thank you. If you are opposed to ordinance LC 24-07, please come forward. Mark?
Those joining us online that would like to speak in opposition to ordinance LC 24-07, please indicate by raising your electronic hand. No hands raised, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any commissioners have any questions before I close the public hearing? If not, close the public hearing on ordinance LC 24-07 and ask for a motion.
Make a motion for ordinance LC 24-07, Recorder of Deeds Fee Schedule Update, and ordinance to repeal and replace Kent County Code Chapter 128 Fees, Part 2 Fee Schedule, Article 11, Fees enumerated 128.44 for the Recorder of Deeds.
Second.
Thank you. Motion made by Commissioner Scott, second by Commissioner Maston. Questions on the motion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Hertz?
Yes.
Mrs. Maston?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 7 yeas.
Thank you. Roll call reveals ordinance LC 24-07 has been approved by Levy Court. Ordinance LC 24-08, Commissioner Scott.
Ordinance LC 24-08, Register Wills Fee Schedule Update, and ordinance to repeal and replace Kent County Code Chapter 128 Fees, Part 2 Fee Schedule, Article 11, Fees enumerated 128.46, Register Wills.
Any questions? Well, at this time, we'll open the public hearing on ordinance LC 24-08. Ask anyone who is in favor to please come forward. Anyone in favor, please come forward. Mark?
Anyone online that would like to speak in favor of ordinance LC 24-08, please indicate by raising your electronic hand. No hands raised, Mr. President.
Thank you. At this time, if there's anyone in the audience who is opposed to ordinance LC 24-08, please come forward. Mark?
If you're online and would like to speak in opposition to ordinance LC 24-08, please indicate by raising your electronic hand. Still no hands raised, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any questions from? If not, we'll close the public hearing and I'll ask for a motion.
Make a motion ordinance LC 24-08, Register Wills Fee Schedule Update, and ordinance to repeal replace Kent County Code Chapter 128 Fees, Part 2 Fee Schedule, Article 11 Fees enumerated 128.46, Register Wills.
Second.
Thank you. Motion made by Commissioner Scott, second by Commissioner Maston. Any questions? Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, can we have roll call, please?
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Hertz?
Yes.
Mrs. Maston?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 7 yeas.
Thank you. Roll call reveals ordinance LC 24-08 has been approved by Levy Court. Moving on to the next page, ordinance LC 24-10, Commissioner Scott.
Ordinance LC 24-10, Clerk of the Peace, fee schedule update and ordinance to repeal and replace Kent County Code, Chapter 128 fees, Part 2 fee schedule, Article 11, fees enumerated 128.40, Clerk of the Peace.
Any questions, Mr. Scott? If not, open public hearing on ordinance LC 24-10. Ask anyone in the audience who may be in favor to please come forward. Anyone in favor? Mark?
If you're online and would like to speak in favor of ordinance LC 2410, please indicate by raising electronic hand. No hands raised, Mr. President.
Thank you. Anyone in the audience opposed? Anyone in the audience opposed? Please come forward. Mark?
Similarly, if you'd like to speak in opposition to ordinance LC 2410, please indicate by raising your electronic hand. Still no hands raised, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any questions from commissioners before I close the public hearing? Seeing none, I close the public hearing and turn it over to Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Mr. President. Make a motion for ordinance LC 24-10, Clerk of the Peace, fee schedule update and ordinance to repeal and replace Kent County Code, Chapter 128 fees, Part 2 fee schedule, Article 11, fees enumerated 128.40, Clerk of the Peace.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Commissioner Scott, second by Commissioner Masson. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Hertz?
Yes.
Mrs. Maston?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 7 yeas.
Thank you. Roll call reveals ordinance LC 24-10 has been approved by Levy Court. Next item, Mrs. Maston.
Ordinance LC 2409, Planning Services Fee Update, and ordinance amending 128.42, Director of Planning Services, to set various fees charged by the Levy Court.
Mrs. Maston, for proceed with public hearing. If not, anyone in the audience who is in favor of ordinance LC 24-09, please come forward. Anyone in favor? Mark?
If you're online and would like to speak in favor of ordinance LC 2409, please indicate by raising your electronic hand. No hands raised, Mr. President.
Thank you. At this time, anyone opposed? Anyone opposed to ordinance LC 24-09?
Similarly, if you're online and would like to speak in opposition to LC 2409, please indicate by raising your electronic hand. No hands raised, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any questions? Any questions before I close the public hearing? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Turn it over to Mrs. Maston.
Motion to approve ordinance LC 2409, Planning Services Fees Update, and ordinance amending 128.42, Director of Planning Services, to set various fees charged by the Levy Court.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Commissioner Masson, second by Commissioner Scott. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, can we have roll call, please, Ms. Tanaka?
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Hertz?
Yes.
Mrs. Maston?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes, ditto everything I said under the first ordinance that Commissioner Scott brought up.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 7 yeas.
Thank you. Roll call reveals ordinance LC 24-09 has been approved by Levy Court. This is the close of our public hearings for this evening. There's no old business, new business, action items from the workshop. Tuesday, April 16th, 2024. Commissioner Maston.
I move to extend the contract for construction plan review and building inspection services to Code Solutions Incorporated of Harbison, Delaware, with said contracted party to be compensated on a fee-for-service basis at an hourly rate of $87.50, with a contract start date of July 1, 2024, and a contract expiry date of June 30th, 2025, and which said contract may be extended for one additional fiscal year upon the mutual consent of the vendor and the county. And I further move to authorize and direct the president of Levy Court to execute the extended contract on behalf of Levy Court.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Commissioner Maston, second by Commissioner Sweeney. Any questions on that motion? Don't see any. Ms. Tanaka, roll call, please.
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Hertz?
Yes.
Mrs. Maston?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
A great tool to have in the toolbox, yes.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 7 yeas.
Thank you. Roll call reveals motion passed. Mr. Angel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Trudy?
Good evening, everyone. We are bringing back before you tonight the FY25 proposed health insurance rates. We will need to move forward with open enrollment and to start preparing to get mailers out to the retirees about open enrollment, and also as we collect the payroll deductions a month in advance. We need to get everything updated with our retirement custodian to update the new rates, as well as getting everything entered into the payroll system. So we're asking for you to, if you want to discuss and review the rates, could we get a vote?
Trudy, if someone doesn't want to make any changes whatsoever, do they have to do anything?
They don't have to do anything.
Great. Make it easy. Commissioner Sweeney.
Thank you. 2 questions, Trudy. First question, this has nothing to do with ASI Flex because that's ASI Flex is coming up, right?
Yes, that is in open enrollment as well, but that has nothing to do with...
Nothing to do with tonight.
That is correct.
All right. I want to make sure I get back in the ASI Flex for next...
And you do have to sign up every year for ASI Flex.
Yes.
Okay.
So what happens if we don't approve this tonight? Because I've already received the letter in the mail saying that open enrollment opens with the rates that were quoted. What happens if we don't approve this tonight?
If you don't approve it tonight, then we wait till you approve it and the rates change.
And then have to send them all out again because we've already sent them out? Shouldn't we have waited until after we approve this to send it out?
Well, I was under the understanding when we had the workshop that we weren't going to move, that we were okay with those numbers. So I mailed the retirement out, the retirement letters.
Well, I'm not a retiree. I'm still an active employee, and I received it in the mail.
You shouldn't have received anything in the mail.
Yep,
Yeah, I did.
I got it.
I did too.
So I want to make sure that we are now locked into that because we've presented that to all the employees without us approving it moving forward. And we can't do anything based on our comments in the workshop without that public vote on the business meeting. So just got to be careful going forward with any of that.
I apologize for that. That was my misunderstanding.
Any commissioner questions? Commissioner Hertz.
I don't have a question, but I've got a comment. Number one, I value the employees, but we've got to be fair to our constituents too. Employees been paying 7% since 2019, and I think my personal feeling is I think it should be at 10%. But I don't agree that we should hit the employees all at one time, and I would propose to go up 1% each year over the next 3 years. And here's some numbers. Since 2019, the employees' share of the insurance has gone up $21 a month, or $253 a year over that 6-year period. Meantime, the county has gone up $246.32 every month per employee for a grand total of $2,955 per employee. In that same period, the employees' wages have gone up 24%, and that's with steps and COLA. And if and I'm just picking a number here, a person making $30,000 in 2019 is now making $37,200. So with us being in a deficit and stuff, we have to consider making some hard decisions. And though I think the employees should be up to 10%, I don't agree to go jump them right 3%, that we should implement it 1% each of these next years. But I think we got to be fair to our constituents, and it has nothing to do against the employees. They're valuable, but we got to be frugal with the money and be fair to our constituents also.
Commissioner Angel.
Thank you. And Trudy, I think I missed this. Looking at the prices on the back, it's gone up. 10 for a doctor, 25 for a specialist, and 75 for RX, where we were doing 20 for a specialist. So I don't remember that being said anywhere.
What are you referring to? Are you referring to the...
On the back of the sheet,
Pull that down, Mark.
it says Kent County Levy Court Health Insurance Premiums,
Are you looking at
7/1
the
to
high
6/30.
number, or are you looking at the low?
High. Well, they're all the same, other than the RX.
It's in the packet, Mark. Okay, here we are. Are you 10, 25, 75 for prescriptions, correct? No, it says 10, 25, and 75. That's for prescriptions. Yes, RX. And that's been the same number. That has not changed. Oh. Yes.
Questions for Trudy? I move to authorize renewal with Delaware Valley Trust, Health Trust, Aetna, of the existing eligible employee retiree health insurance plan design with integrated HRA, and approve the phantom premium rates along with the employee/retiree and dependent cost share at rates as presented for the 2024-2025 plan year.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Commissioner Angel, second by Commissioner Maston. Any questions on the motion? Not Mr. Naka.
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Hertz?
No.
Mrs. Maston?
Yes.
Is that you? Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yep.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 6 yeas, 1 nay.
Thank you. Roll call reveals the motion passed. Commissioner, I don't believe we have an executive session this evening, correct?
No.
All right.
Not tonight.
Number 2.
Move to go into executive session meeting following the workshop on May 7th, 2024 for preliminary discussion on site acquisition for a publicly funded capital improvements legal strategy session regarding collective bargaining or pending or potential litigation and personnel matters pursuant to 29 Del Code 10004 B2, 4, and 9.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Commissioner Angel, second by Commissioner Sweeney. Any questions on the motion? If not, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Hertz?
Yes.
Mrs. Maston?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 7 yeas.
Thank you. Roll call reveals motion passed. Continuing on, any information items? Information items. Mr. Angel.
Thank you, Mr. President. This past week, we had our DAC meeting, and I think you all got a proposal from Polytech that I couldn't talk about because I didn't get it till the night before. I was supposed to share it with Terry. Unfortunately, he had a bad knee, so I presented the best I could. There was no prices, nothing else that was presented with that. I just want to go on record that I stated 3 times I could not talk about it because there was nothing to talk about because I had no facts to look at. So unless you want me telling you lies, I couldn't say anything until I got the document. So I got the document and laid it out. Only the highlight areas that I could see because it was so dark in there. Mr. Scott had to show me his light off his phone in order for me to get to some of those document pieces of paper. So just wanted to let you know that yeah, I hope you had a chance to look at it and look at the proposal. And the nice thing about it was the healthy discussion was also to get North and South counties involved with us because they have airports and they're going to need people. And that's what this program's for. Thank you.
Any other information items? Other information items? I don't believe we don't have a meeting next month, right? Or next week, right? So after that meeting, we do have Old Dover Days Parade, I believe. Does that fall that weekend or fall? Yeah. So Lauren is trying to put together a parade entry, including Levy Court Commissioners. And so if you would like to join us, please do so. I mean, it always goes over well. We have a new banner, and we have new shirts and jackets and all that kind of stuff, so we can dress the same if you like, or if you want to dress in traditional costume, you can do that as well. But please join us in the parade if you can, if you have the time. It's greatly appreciated by the people to see their Levy Court Commissioners participate in something like that. So.
No leadership tomorrow?
I don't know. Leadership tomorrow? No. Yeah. And May 7th schedule, we're going to schedule Polytech to come in and do a presentation. And while we're on that subject, I understand from different ones that some of you may have heartburn because Commissioner Angel and I were invited to go down to Polytech and talk to them. And it was no different than any of the other of you folks going to being invited to talk to constituents, because that's what Polytech is, a constituent. And I'm Commissioner at Large, so I would expect it to be there. But we made no promises. We went there and we listened to them, listened to their presentation, and the only thing we told them is we'd put them on the agenda. So if you've got heartburn over it, say something to me. But at the same time, keep that in mind when you go meet with other people. That's just something that's been nagging at me. I've heard through the grapevine that some of you may have heartburn over that. And if you do, contact me. Tell me. So, no secret meetings, made no promises. We were invited to go to talk to them, and mainly it was a listening session, not a talk-to session, but a listening session. And I'm going to continue to do it. Whoever calls me to ask me to come listen to them, I'm going to do it. As my role as president, or as my role as commissioner at large, or whatever, my role as Levy Court Commissioner. If I'm invited, I'm going to go. And they're going to be here on the 7th to make a presentation. And if you can ask them at that time if Commissioner Angel and I made them any promises. And you'll find that we did not. So I don't care who it is, commissioners or a county administrator. If you've got a problem, you come to me. All right, that's all I got to say on that. Public comments. Thank you, Mr. Pardee.
Good evening, Mr. President, Commissioners, and staff. For the record, John Pardee with the law firm Beardman, Dallas, Braxton, Federico here in Dover. And I just wanted to offer a few comments about the APFO ordinances that were gutted tonight.
You realize we already voted, right?
I do.
Okay.
But I'm speaking now because I was asked by quite a few people to speak in favor, and I was asked by one person not to speak at all. And they're no longer here. But in any event, I wanted to offer a little bit of solace, I think, to what happened for those who had some reservations. If you're concerned about growth, especially outside the growth zone, it's not the APFOs that are preventing that from happening. What's preventing it from happening is sewer. If you remember, after the APFOs, there were a series of ordinances that were enacted which cumulatively had the effect of making it impossible to extend public sewer outside the growth zone. You used to be able to do that if you were contiguous. There was a provision under Chapter 180 of your code that allowed you to do that under certain circumstances. You had to meet a number of different elements. That got gutted. So you can't extend public sewer outside the growth zone, and you outlawed community septic. So it is now impossible in Kent County to build what during the heyday was a conventional residential subdivision outside the growth zone. So keep that in mind. I don't think you're going to see any serious issues arise with regard to roads, mostly because the process that's in place now didn't exist back then. The way that DelDOT does things now is completely different. And to answer Commissioner Hertz's questions, I know of a lot of projects that have had to do off-site road improvements because DelDOT has required them as part of various development agreements. So I don't share my good friend Mr. Petitmange's fear or concern that this is somehow going to be unleashing the gates to a lot of problems. I really don't. The landscape and land development now is much different. So the schools are covered, the roads are covered, and the water's covered, and you guys are always in control of sewer, which is really what drives development, honestly. So I think what you did tonight is generally a good thing. It was maybe 18 years too late. Kidding. I will tell you, the only reason that the county got sued, and it was more than 34 times, was because the APFOs were made retroactive, honestly.
I'm sorry, who was it that sued us?
I can't remember who it was. I remember reading about it in the paper. But honestly, developers generally, and I'll be short in light of the hour, I'm going to wrap up here. But developers generally just want to know what the rules are, and they can make business decisions if they know what the rules are. And what happened with the APFOs is you had a lot of development that was, happening too quickly. I acknowledged that then, and I acknowledge it now. You had to do something. But what caused all the dust up was that you had developers who had signed contracts, who had gone to closing and bought properties, who had borrowed money, who had gotten through various levels of approval in the process, and then all of a sudden the rules changed. And so the problem really with the APFOs was not that they changed the rules, it's that they changed them retroactively. So I just wanted to say, after listening to all of it tonight, I don't think that the repeal of those 3 APFOs is going to create any problems. I do think it will help free up some valuable staff time. Your staff doesn't really have the expertise to review traffic impact studies. And the school issue, all the other stuff is being managed. You guys continue to do a great job representing your constituents, listening to people, and trying to make the best decisions that you can. I appreciate and respect that. Thank you very much.
So putting your attorney hat on, and in retrospect with all the lawsuits that occurred back then, because we tried to make it retroactive. If we take the APFOs out now, in your opinion, what happens to any applications that are currently in the pipeline that we can't make retroactive? Are they still going to have to live under the way the APFOs looked when they
Interesting
apply.
question. I suppose it depends on the extent to which they've entered into agreements based on the APFOs. I know you used to have to enter into an agreement with the school fee.
Right.
Well,
the school fee is beside the point because
Right.
the surcharge is completely separate, and that's what all the development has been using over the past 8 to 10 years. Schools appreciate those more because they get the money right away.
Right.
They don't have to wait for any kind of
Referendum.
Right, any kind of construction or capital improvement. So schools appreciate that. We already do the water in another section of the code, of King County Code. Roads was just repetitive with another state agency.
Yeah. Well, I think the answer to your question ultimately is that there probably won't be a lot of projects that get caught up in that because DelDOT's process includes things like traffic signal agreements, contributions in lieu of the traffic signal revolving fund. And there's a lot of things that DelDOT requires. So if developers have entered into those arrangements under the scheme, the regulatory hierarchy that existed under the APFOs, that's probably not going to change if you take the APFOs away because DelDOT would have required them to enter into those agreements anyway.
Right.
There might be, I can't tell you for sure, I don't know, there may be 1 or 2 projects out there that, would benefit from the repeal of the APFOs. But I think for the vast majority of projects, it's really not going to make any substantive
Well,
difference.
obviously, Andy Strines is going to benefit by the repeal, so.
Yeah, I don't know the facts of what Andy Strine's situation was. To my recollection, all the APFOs did have some exemption. You could apply for an exemption. So I don't know why that wasn't possible there. But I do think that because the regulatory landscape has changed so much, and there are now regulations in place that address a lot of the concerns of the
Right.
APFOs, independent of the APFOs, I don't think you're going to see a lot of problems crop up.
Well, what I like best is that we still, according to the experts I've talked to, still have the ability to request the TIS, regardless of the APFOs, but we also have the ability to waive a TIS if,
Right.
our
So
leadership thought it was.
Yeah, I don't want to
the right thing
belabor the
do.
point. I will tell you that I know that Sussex County, in their MOU with DelDOT, has made it clear that they are to get TI. Projects in Sussex County get postponed all the time because the TIS review letter is not done.
Right.
I don't know if your MOU includes that kind of language or not. I think Newcastle does, so you might look at that. But what that does is it clarifies that the county does have the ability to demand a TIS at particular points in the process. So if you don't have that, you can easily get
That's
it.
one of the questions I asked Sarah, is to look at that MOU. It's not an MOU, it's an agreement with the development coordinator at DelDOT in order to make sure we have the agreements in place. But just, wouldn't you agree that DelDOT's changes over the last 15 years have been reflective of what the counties, Newcastle County and Kent County, have tried to do through the APFOs, not only in traffic impact studies, TIDs, but also in that stupid decision tree that they had, which rated, projects that they were trying to do.
Yeah, I would agree that their regulations have changed as well. And so developers are paying for infrastructure as they should. So thank you all for your time.
Mr.
Always
Party,
good to see
thank you very much for your comments.
Absolutely.
I know myself, the last 5 months, I've had 2 encounters over entry exits for developments, and both times I had DelDOT officials look at me and I said, well, where's the county stand on it? And they're like, and? So,
right.
And we had these in play then, and they did absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. So
Yeah.
I think we need to look at other ways to kind of control the growth, things that we do have control over.
Agreed. Thank you all for your time. Have a good night.
Commissioner comments, any commissioner comments? Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Majority rules, we're adjourned.